There's a reason that we live so far from Hollywood, in the country looking hard to find a home, with nothing perfect or considered, but we're so damn good. It's the story.
Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt live from the West Coast, where El Diablo is blowing. The Santa Ana winds are whipping through Southern California. It's actually 81 degrees at this hour in California at John Wayne Airport. 81 degrees, middle of the night. You can imagine what's going to happen at the Super Bowl on Sunday. Everybody's going to melt. Seriously, these Angelinos, they're going to leave in the first quarter. They're just going to be out of there. Now, we got word yesterday that the Hugh cruise, which has been off for 2 years, we haven't been on a Hugh cruise in 3 years, after 18 consecutive years of Hugh cruising. The Hugh cruise is back April 18th to April 30th. But we're going to try and do something different this year. We're going to broadcast from the ship. And so the people running the ship and the people running the trip sent me a list of technical requirements, to which I responded, send those to Dwayne, because I have no idea what we need. And by the way, if anything goes wrong in the broadcast of the ship, you will hear this sound on the radio. That will be Dwayne being thrown overboard. We're going to Peter Pan him, and he's going to go off just like Captain Hook. One more time, how will Dwayne... That's not a big enough... Dwayne's a little bigger than that. You got a bigger splash?
What do you mean you have a bigger splash?
I think we need a bigger splash.
Okay, Adam, just turn the volume up.
Okay, here we go. Can we have that splash again? Dwayne going over. That's it. Dwayne.
There's your bigger splash. There's the great behind the scenes of radio. You want a smaller splash? Turn down the volume. What is the matter with you?
Good morning, America. Good morning.
We were saying before we started, the best parts of this show you don't get to hear.
You never get to hear the pre-show, because the pre-show today, we're working with new equipment. Garrett the Destroyer came in. We love Garrett. Garrett flies in and he changes all the equipment. And then for 23 hours, Dwayne pulls he can't pull his hair out, as you can see.
Yeah, oh, you're funny. That's really funny.
If you were watching on the Salem News channel, you would have gotten that one. He can't pull his hair out, but he can go, oh my gosh, because the equipment doesn't work the way it was supposed to work. But we've got it working now. And so that's a much better camera than was here yesterday. Let me do the rundown. You know, the funny thing about this is every morning, the two founders of this company, Stu and Ed, listen every morning. And Stu always says, this is the best show in radio, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, they're really proud of this one,
They're really great. Good takeoff here. Let me give you some good news, all right? Let me give you some good news to start. The NBC Olympics, according to NPR, NBC says ratings are so far are at historic lows, even factoring in viewers on streaming platforms and NBC's cable channel. And then the head of NBC Universal TV, a fellow by the name of Mark Lazarus, quote, the sky is definitely not falling. Yes, we have run into a bunch of bad factors that have made it harder for us. All right, rule number one. Remember this, kids. If you're on your way to school this morning in the back of the car, if anybody says the sky is not falling, run, because the sky is falling. And right now, advertisers are running away from because Americans have internalized that China poisoned the world. And they don't want to be there, and they don't want to watch it, and they spit on the sponsors of this stuff, not on the athletes. They applaud the athletes. The people are it's like sponsoring an ad in the 1940 German Olympics. There weren't any such thing. They were held in 1936 for the Steelers fans. I don't want to confuse them. But if they had held them in 1940, when the genocide was in full swing but not available for people to see it, or in 1944, when they were doing about 12,000 people a day at Treblinka and killing 12,000 Jews a day, and then you advertised on those Olympics, that's what you're doing in China. And that's why Americans are rejecting it and are revolted. And by the way, I think it's doing brand damage to NBC. Terrible brand damage to NBC. They're carrying the genocide Olympics and they're celebrating it. I haven't watched a minute of it. I skip over. I'm sorry for the athletes. I don't know who's competing. I don't care. I hope you don't care. I hope you never watch it. There are 1 million people in concentration camps. Hong Kong has been repressed. Jimmy Lai is in prison. Jimmy Lai is a great, great Christian Catholic man who has stood up to the Chinese communists forever. They've destroyed the Tibetan culture. They've driven out the Dalai Lama, but the left used to care about that. They don't anymore, and we should not. Now, on that front, yesterday's big story, this is the Telegraph. That's my UK paper to go to. Early lab-grown COVID virus found in sample lends weight to Wuhan theory. Did you hear that? Hungarian scientists claim that samples of Antarctic soil sent to a Shanghai firm in 2019 became contaminated with an unknown variant. Okay? That doesn't make a lot of sense. But bioinformatics experts from the University of Veterinary Medicine and Loránd University in Budapest, Hungary, made the discovery by accident while examining genetic data from soil samples collected from Antarctica in the late 2018 and early 2019. The samples were sent to Sanggon Biotech in Shanghai for sequencing, where they became contaminated with a previously unknown variant of COVID-19. The variant has mutations that bridge the gap between the bat coronavirus and the earliest Wuhan strain. So they sent soil to China, and it came back with COVID-19. And the only way that this COVID-19 can get to what we've got, it's a bridge COVID-19, is by genetic manipulation. So China poisoned the world, and we're having the games there. No, I know, I'm not going to watch the communist games. No way. Serious COVID-19 cases continue to decline as Omicron further ebbs. The irrelevant Tony Fauci is out there saying whatever, we don't know, we don't care. On Ukraine, this is according to the Fred Kagan's critical threats analysis. Likely courses of action, it lists about 10. I think he's going to invade because I don't think the West has ever been this weak. Germany has left NATO effectively. So I think he's going to invade. We'll talk to Jim Talon about that. President Biden has approved a Pentagon plan to help Americans get out of Ukraine. Isn't that good? They learned from Afghanistan. Don't leave your people behind. It's bad for business. It's bad for Americans. So the White House approved a Pentagon plan for U.S. troops in Poland to help thousands of Americans likely to flee Ukraine if Russia attacks. Yeah, I wonder how they're going to do that. Fears of Ukraine invasion rise as top Russian commanders fly to Belarus for a massive joint military drill. So if you see Patton and Omar Bradley and Eisenhower on a beach, something's going on. The Russian equivalent, Sashi and Sochi and Boris, are together on the Belarus border with their binoculars trained at Kyiv. They know something's up. The Telegraph also notes that Putin has already won. As you know, President Biden has to make a decision sometime soon on his next Supreme Court justice to replace Justice Breyer. And the leading candidate, Judge Brown Jackson, of the D.C. Circuit, has some Gitmo problems. She represented a lot of Gitmo defendants, and that will just bring Afghanistan front and center. And that means we'll replay the loss of Afghanistan repeatedly, and we'll replay the disaster that was Joe Biden's non-leadership. And so they're rethinking that over at the White House. Maybe they don't want to have a Gitmo defendant going on the Supreme Court, defender on the Supreme Court. Everyone has their right to a day in court and defense counsel. It's a question of how did the defense counsel defend you. You can cross lines. I've only defended kids in drug lockdown for friends. I've never done a real criminal defense, and so I have no idea what it requires, but I know you have to make choices in ethics. I mean, learning the criminal law ethics stuff is kind of crazy. It takes a while. That's why I don't do it. But the new backup, Justice Kruger of the California Supreme Court, what goes on during these nomination battles is candidates or people who support Justice Brown Jackson, her clerks, and her friends, are busy feeding Oppo research on Justice Kruger to the Washington Post. And the best they can come up with is that Justice Kruger, when she was Deputy Solicitor General of the United States, had to take a stinker of a case, Hosanna Tabor, up to the Supreme Court. And Hosanna Tabor concerns the ministerial exception to the Establishment Clause, for exercise clause, religious clauses, where churches get to hire whoever they want, regardless of the discrimination rules of the United States. They get to, Catholics get to hire Catholics. Lutherans get to hire Lutherans, but there aren't that many Lutherans anymore, so they have to sometimes bend the rules, but they still get to hire Lutherans. And the state of Minnesota attempted to interfere with that rule, and I think it was the state of Minnesota, wasn't it? I think so. It's a 2012 case called Hosanna Tabor Evangelical Lutheran Church Oh, no, it was the EEOC. So Justice Kruger got stuck with the stinker of a case, and she lost 9-0. Because it was just obviously unconstitutional for the EEOC to do what they did to Lutheran Tabor. And so they're holding that out against her. That's not really, you get signed a case that the Deputy Solicitor General does. I'm still thinking Kruger is the likely one, which may be the kiss of death because I'm never right. Go Rams, beat the Bengals. I'll be right back, America. The Santa Anas are blowing in California. I hope to make it through the entire show. And if we can have the sound effect of Dwayne going overboard again, please, I like that. Oh, alas, we can't do that. Dwayne's overboard already. Stay tuned. This is Hugh Hewitt for townhall.com. Buckle up for 2022. The year in politics is going to be rough. The midterm election year seems predestined to banish the Democratic majorities in both houses of Congress. The country senses infirmity in President Biden, and many worry that our adversaries in China, Russia, and Iran sense that opening too. The shadow campaign for the GOP nomination in 2024 opens now, with a clear frontrunner being former President Donald Trump. The ranks of the top tier among possible GOP presidential nominees in alphabetical order starts with two senators, Arkansas's Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz of Texas. Then we have the populist Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, the former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. If the world grows even darker in the days to come, Cotton and Pompeo, two former soldiers, start with some advantages. It's possible one or more will run whether or not the former president does. My bet with 3 years to go is that Trump runs, and runs hard. Buckle up. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
What the Supreme Court has said is you have to have a compelling state interest, and the compelling state interest that the Supreme Court found was the benefits that flow from having a diverse student body, whatever those benefits may be. But you have to have a diverse student body to get these certain benefits, okay? So that justifies this kind of racial alchemy in terms of admissions. Here's the problem. Increasingly at schools, you have, regardless of how supposedly integrated they are, you're getting more and more racial separatism, separate classes, separate dormitories, separate graduations. There's more and more of that going on, and one of the basic reasons for that is because of mismatch, because of the serious mismatch in academic qualifications between Asians, Latinos, blacks, and whites.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
You want to know what's even crazier and funnier in a sick way? There's a security guard right there. The shoplifter, the looter, walks right by the security guard who isn't doing anything. He's got a jacket on with the big security on the back of his coat, and he stands there and watches the guy literally brushes right by the security guard. The security guard, what are they paying the security guard for? Just to stand there? Why don't we just put mannequins up in stores in New York? I may never go back. I swear, I may never go back. New York is turning into a hellhole, and Democrats are watching it. They're letting it happen. I can't wait to get Joe Borelli's take on all of this insanity.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
You called your son, and you personally promised him you would be here.
Lucas, I don't know how to help you!
Your daddy loves you, you gotta know it, pal!
Prayer is a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work, if you believe.
What reason does he have to care about some guy who's supposed to be his dad, but he's never around? I can't do it, I can't. I'm not ready for this, man.
I'm done with you.
We all deserve a second chance. Right, Ethan?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Welcome back, America. A new day is dawning. It is going to be a windy and hot day in Southern California, where I am for a few more weeks. I make the rounds of the borders of the broadcast area. I will be making my trip over to Hawaii in March. And having made the border rounds, I will be back inside the Beltway. But first, what is going on up north? The Canadian trucker blockade. Well, you have no idea how out of control the Canadian government is. So much so that Justin Trudeau lost one of his backbenchers, saying, "What are we doing here?" I can't help but speak with regret that both the tone and the policies of the government have changed drastically since the last election, said the ambitious 34-year-old lawyer at the top of the dissenters among the Liberal Party. His name is Joel Lightbound. It went from a more positive approach to one that stigmatizes and divides people. And so the truckers are angry. The protests are tapping into Canada's lockdown blues. They've had it. They're done with it. They used to be a free people. Held hostage in my own city, Ottawa restaurants sit empty as trucks block customers. Meanwhile, the convoy style is protested. The protest has blocked necessary car-making supplies in Detroit, so it's beginning to be felt here. There is an answer to this, which is to actually follow the rest of the world, Justin Trudeau. But no, they are lefties. They want to control your lives, so they're just going to go forward. Key article in the New York Times today. Did the first Americans arrive via the land bridge? This geneticist says no. Now, from the time, I know that everything I learned in grade school is wrong. Bill Bryson wrote that book, The Brief History of Nearly Everything. And in it, he explored, he's a little couple of years older than me, but basically everything we learned was wrong. They had everything wrong. They had the Big Bang wrong. They had the continental drift wrong. They had everything wrong. But the one thing we counted on was that 13,000 years ago, some people walked over from Russia, and they became the Indians, and the Indians were here when we got here from Europe. We being Americans of European descent running into Americans of Native American descent. The fact of the matter is, apparently, they came across the Kelp Bridge. I have no idea what the Kelp Bridge is. And I'm not going to look it up because I actually don't think this knowledge has any utility for the radio show, but I wanted to let you know. Democrats want to abandon Florida, according to James Freeman. They're giving up on the free state of Florida. The culture of Florida has turned so anti-government under the leadership of Ron DeSantis that Democrats are just packing up and going home. And this is great. Let's listen to Ron DeSantis yesterday talking about why are Democrats everywhere running away from masking school children? Cut number one.
These kids are so much happier being able to go to school without having to wear masks for 8 hours a day. So when you start to see them kind of reevaluate or say all this, just understand this. The science didn't change. Well, the medical science didn't change. The political science changed. They feel the heat. They know that voters have been tired of perpetual lockdown policies. They know that they have basically offered no off-ramp, and they know that they're fixing to get whooped at the polls. And so that's what's causing the epiphany. But the fact of the matter is, if they had looked at the actual science from the beginning, they would have known that this was something that Florida was right on.
Yep. They would have known, and that's why people love Florida. That's why you can't buy a house in Florida now. Let me check markets, brought to you by Birch Gold. Again, if you want to buy gold, and I always recommend not numanistics, buy ounces of gold. You know what they're worth. Today, gold is trading for $18.33 an ounce. It's creeping up because inflation is creeping up. The 10-year Treasury at 1.929. It's creeping up. Everything's creeping up. Birch Gold will help you. Go to hughgold.com, hughgold.com, or text my name, Hugh, to 989898. They'll send you information on how to buy gold, more importantly, how to roll over a portion of your IRA or 401k into a depository that the IRS respects. Birch Gold's got thousands of five-star reviews, wonderful people. That's who I buy my gold from. I have a different price point than most people. I buy it when I get worried about hyperinflation. I last bought it when it was at $2,000 an ounce. It's not back there yet, but it's rising. It's rising. And what did the markets do yesterday? Dow up 305, NASDAQ up 295, S&P up 65. And this morning overseas, everything is green. They kind of believe, they're talking themselves into believing that Putin's not going to invade. I'm not quite believing that. When we come back, my new big boss, that means the FCC commissioner, who isn't really in favor of free speech. Don't go anywhere, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Sometimes there are policies so destructive that at first you don't believe they're true. Joe Biden is currently defending one, his plan to award $450,000 to migrants separated from their families after entering the U.S. illegally. Children of deceased U.S. soldiers are separated from their parents permanently. They don't receive this kind of money. And migrants who enter the U.S. legally certainly don't get this kind of payout. The really big jackpot, it seems, is being reserved for the lawbreakers. There are some obvious truths here. First, behavior that's subsidized gets repeated. Joe Biden is effectively inviting many more illegal immigrants to breach America's open borders. Second, he's betting over time the payoffs will benefit his party in political terms. Meanwhile, the vast majority of Americans watch in shock and dismay as our president, the country's chief law enforcement officer, brazenly rewards lawbreaking, a clear violation of his oath to defend our nation's laws. It's a sorry sight indeed.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
It seems like the Democrats tried their best to try to eliminate the filibuster, and it failed. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, thankfully, it did fail. Republicans stood united against that, as we have been from the very beginning, and Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin also stood with us in preserving the rules and the customs of the Senate. These rules and customs go back more than 200 years, Charlie. They are directly downstream from where our founders created a Senate in the first place, to provide the sober second thought against radical sweeping change to our country. It's pretty amazing that 48 out of 50 Democrats were willing to blow up the filibuster. They were willing to break the rules to change the rules. And Charlie, that would have just been the first step towards redistributing political power in this country. The Democrats' next stop probably would have been to make Washington, D.C. a state, our federal city that is by far the most liberal jurisdiction in America. So the Democrats could get 2 more Democratic senators in perpetuity. The next stop would have been to pack our federal courts, to include the Supreme Court, to stop the courts from overturning any of these unconstitutional actions. This entire effort, Charlie, was not about just altering this or that public policy. It was about forever changing the structure of political power in our country. You sometimes heard the argument that, well, the Democrats shouldn't do this because the shoe was on the other foot. Their entire goal was to make sure, Charlie, that the shoe would never be on the other foot. So it was a critical day in the history of our country and the history of the Senate as an institution. And I'm glad we stopped these radicals. That's why we have to turn them out of power in November.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
This really is a Leninist strategy. Lenin's old saying that the capitalists will sell us the rope by which we will hang them is what China's doing. The Soviets couldn't do it for a couple reasons. Number one, they didn't have the money. They didn't have a whole lot of rubles to throw around, and people in the West didn't want them. But number two, there was a lot bigger sense of social cohesion during the Cold War. The notion, if you're a corporate executive during the Cold War, that you would be playing footsies with the Kremlin was outrageous. And yet in the case of China, the human rights situation, the challenge to American national security, is every bit as great. I would argue perhaps even greater than it was in the Cold War era. But Wall Street, Silicon Valley, they are all happy to not only do deals with them, but do deals with them that benefit the Chinese military and intelligence state, and they don't seem to particularly care that they do.
Well, there was stigma in helping the Soviets. There's no stigma in helping the Chinese communists.
That's right. And I think that, part of that is there's been this naivete for decades that if we just gave China money, if we gave them access to our technology, they were going to buy our blue jeans, they were going to watch some of our movies, they would become just like us. What's really happened when you look at issues like censorship by big tech in the United States, when you look at some of the other things that are going on, it's not that China's become more like us. We've actually become more like China. And that experiment has to fade away. And the problem is not only were our elites wrong in their prescription of that policy, but that policy made them rich. And they do not want to now give up those relationships with Beijing because it means the money's going to stop flowing.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening to the Hugh Hewitt Show. The FCC regulates this show, so I'm always very interested in who is being nominated to the Federal Communications Commission. And President Biden nominated a fairly radical person in Professor Gigi Son. And they held a hearing yesterday into a potential conflict of interest that she has by virtue of her previous service as a board member of Lowcast, which had a plan to stream other broadcast TV signals from major broadcasters. Senator Wickers and others believe that Son would be financially liable to the broadcast companies she would be regulating as a member of the FCC by virtue of this plan. Ted Cruz is Javert in the hearing. So let's tune in to Ted Cruz cross-examining Gigi Son yesterday in the Senate, cut number 6.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Son. The Biden administration has a pattern of abusing their power and getting struck down in court over and over again. As you know, I have significant concerns about your record, that you've demonstrated a hostility to conservative speech in particular, to Fox News in particular. And the FCC is a very dangerous place for a regulator to have the authority to silence political views with which you disagree. But we now have a second issue that implicates ethics that I think is deeply serious. You were a board member of the nonprofit Sports Fans Coalition, New York, which operated the Lowcast streaming service. You joined the board knowing that they had been sued for copyright infringement. And a federal district court entered summary judgment for the plaintiffs that they had engaged in copyright infringement, that they had broken the law. Ultimately, the case was settled. And I've got to say, Ms. Sohn, the timing of the settlement stinks. Biden administration announced their intent to nominate you on October 26, 2021. The confidential settlement agreement was signed on October 27th, 2021, the day after the intent to nominate. Your actual nomination was made October 28th, the next day, and on that day, a public settlement was filed. The public settlement claimed that the plaintiffs, ABC, NBC, CBS, were going to be paid $32 million, that they had $32 million in damages. That was the public settlement announced on the day of your nomination. At the time is that the secret settlement cut $32 million down to $700,000. That's 2 cents on the dollar. I've litigated a lot of cases. I've settled a lot of cases. I don't recall ever settling a case that my clients had won, that we had a victorious court judgment for 2 cents on the dollar. But you know what? I've never had a case against someone who was about to be the regulator of my industry. On the face of that, that's a sweetheart deal. Did you disclose that sweetheart deal paid to the company on whose board you served, or rather, not paid from the company, that is essentially a gift from the companies the FCC regulate? Did you disclose to this committee that agreement?
I did. So, Senator, let me just explain first. I was not a party. There's no sweetheart. Number one, I was never financially liable from the day I stepped on the SFCNY board because there was a case narrowing agreement.
Did you disclose the agreement to this committee?
I did. I said the matter was settled.
No. Okay.
Let me explain.
Hold on a second. The matter was settled doesn't answer. Did you disclose the secret settlement agreement that settled it for $700,000, not the $32 million that was public? Did you disclose it to this committee? Yes or no?
I did. I did when
you disclosed the $700,000 secret settlement.
No, because I was not allowed. Okay. I was not permitted.
Ms. Sohn, that's actually incorrect. What provision of the agreement says you're not allowed to? All right, I have it in front of me. It's provision 6.0, and here's what it says. I'm going to quote it. Quote, no party will communicate or authorize anyone to contact or communicate with the media or press, orally or in writing or otherwise, concerning the agreement or the order. Last time I checked, the United States Senate is not the press. There's nothing in this agreement that prohibits you from disclosing it to the Senate. You did not disclose it to the Senate. Let me ask you this. Did you disclose it to the White House?
Well, again,
it's a yes or no. Did you disclose the $700,000 secret settlement to the White House?
No,
yes
I did not.
So you did not disclose it to the White House?
Oh, stop. Oh.
She's toast, right?
She's toast. You can't not disclose to the Senate, but you especially can't not disclose. They should pull her. Ted Cruz comes back, cut number 7.
Language agreed to between Sports Fan Coalition New York and the 4 networks. And the networks wanted that language in order to scare away anybody who might want to start Lowcast 2.0. That is not the judge.
So you said you didn't sign the secret agreement. I'm holding the signature page.
I did.
Secret agreement. Your signature is on it with the date of October 27th.
But that's not
amazingly the day before you're nominated. You signed the secret agreement. The public agreement says $32 million. The secret agreement says $700,000, and you kept that secret.
Well, because I wasn't. It's a confidential agreement.
No, under the terms of it, you were not allowed to talk to the press about it, but you were allowed to.
No, that's not what counsel has advised me. I couldn't.
Stop! You're done. You can't do a sweetheart deal with the networks you are going to regulate and not disclose it to the Senate. Done. I'm very easy on confirmation. I got confirmed 100-0. I just putting that out there that you ought to refer to me as the Honorable Hugh Hewitt because I've been confirmed by the United States Senate, so I'm actually honorable. But I got 100-0. Ted Kennedy, Robert Byrd, they all voted for me. And I went through the disclosures, and I had no secret agreements that I hid. But I know what? If I'd done a deal where I basically gave back $31.3 million to the people I was regulating at OPM, that would have been a problem. More importantly, the Reagan White House would have pulled my nomination about 5 seconds. 5 seconds if you didn't disclose something. The last question on the Reagan White House. I don't know if they have it anymore. I don't know if they have any ethics things at all at the Biden White House. I don't know. They probably do. I don't know. The last question, is there anything that you should disclose that if it became public would embarrass the president? Now, that basically takes Dwayne out of everything. But it's just basic, a very basic, tell us what we need to know, please. Do you think they needed to know about this? I don't think Ron Klain would have put her up there with this. Ron Klain's a smart guy, the chief of staff of the White House. Oh, this is bad. And that's not her only problem. John Thune, Senator, GOP whip, cut number 9.
Very quickly, the issue of impartiality. You're going to be a referee. You have taken sides, as you've pointed out. But, I mean, some of the things that you said on your Twitter account the attacks that you've launched, for example, on Fox News. And trust me, the latter have played their role in destroying democracy and electing autocrats like, say, Fox News. Fox News has had the most negative impact on our democracy. In the same tweet, you said Fox News is state-sponsored propaganda. You've attacked Sinclair Broadcasting, and just a minute ago you attacked the Big Four in an answer to a previous question. How are you going to be impartial? I mean, these are not like positions. I mean, these are attacks, and you are going to be a referee.
Yes, Senator, I wasn't, just to be clear, I was not attacking the Big Four. I was just saying they're big companies and they have more means than a tiny little nonprofit. So let me just be clear about that.
Fox News is an attack.
Yeah, but Fox, let me just talk about that. And Senator Blunt, I'm smiling at you because you and I talked about this on December 1st. Those tweets came in the discussion of big tech and whether they should be responsible for disinformation. And that was said as a public advocate and a private citizen and has no bearing on any proceeding that Fox would be involved in. Secondly, Fox News is not a regulatee of the FCC. It's a cable network, and the FCC doesn't regulate them.
Hey, Dwayne,
but
it's not blowing outside. The wind isn't blowing.
Yeah.
That's my point of view. The wind is not blowing.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and you can say that as a private citizen, right?
I'm a private citizen.
Right.
I've got no interest in the wind. The wind is not blowing.
So she's got the disclosure
Stop
problem.
it. The wind is not blowing.
Uh-huh.
Just want people to know that. What's it over? What do you think it is?
It's blowing.
It's not blowing. It's not blowing because I say it's not blowing. Those were not attacks. The wind is not blowing.
You're boy, you got my vote.
Okay, there you go. Just wanted to lock that up. Meanwhile, Glenn Youngkin's doing a victory lap. I love this so much because I endorsed Governor Youngkin early on because I said this guy's a winner. He'll know how to do this, and he is a winner. He went on Fox with Sean Hannity last night to talk about the fact that Democratic governors are following his lead in getting rid of the mask mandate. And yesterday, the Virginia Assembly voted along with the Virginia Senate to do away with mandatory masking anywhere in the state. Cut number 20.
Yeah, Sean, this is a defining moment for parents and kids in Virginia. And we have a bipartisan movement to get parents back in charge of their kids' lives because, remember, parents matter. And that's what voters said loudly in November. And so all of a sudden now, where Virginia has been leading, we're seeing the rest of the country also come around us because it's time to get back to normal. It's time to empower parents. And I am so excited that Virginia is leading in a bipartisan way to give parents the power to choose whether their child wears a mask or not in school.
All right. The question is, you're giving the option. If parents want their kids to still wear the mask, the parents can instruct their kids to wear the mask. Then it's their choice. I thought Democrats were pro-choice.
Well, this is the reality of, I think, the misperceptions that the media is trying to drive. If you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. And if you don't want your child to wear a mask, then they shouldn't wear a mask. And this is a decision that parents should make. We've been talking about this for a year in Virginia. This is one of the major factors that led to our win in November. We went to work on day one, driving forward our agenda. 11 executive actions, 59 bills in our House and our Senate, 25 budget amendments to put our day one game plan to work. And part of that is empowering parents. And I'm so excited to see a bipartisan group come together and recognize that Virginia voters are the ones we all work for, not the education unions or the school boards. We work for parents and kids and teachers, and we're going to allow parents to make a decision for their kids. You know, in Virginia, we are going to get taxes down. We're going to make our schools great again. We, in fact, are going to make our communities safe. We're going to get our economy moving again in order to create jobs for everybody. And guess what? We're going to stand up for our constitutional rights. These are not Republican values.
Just got to say, Glenn Youngkin, home run. I want you to hear the language of the bill. Notwithstanding any other provision of law or any other regulation, rule, or policy implemented by a school board, school division, school official, other state or local authority, the parent of any child enrolled in a public elementary or secondary school or in any school-based early childhood care and education program may elect that such child to not wear a mask while on school property. A parent making such an election shall not be required to provide a reason or any other certification of the child's health or education status. No student shall suffer any adverse disciplinary or academic consequences as a result of this parental election. Bravo, Glenn Youngkin and the Virginia electorate. Relieffactor.com. Bravo. People doing victory laps need relieffactor.com. And I'm doing a victory lap because I was for Glenn Youngkin early on because I knew he would do this stuff. Icarian and Curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. I tell you, every day, lukewarm coffee, whatever you take it with, it makes your day easier because it's nature's anti-inflammatories. Icarian and Curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. 4 pills. I take them every day in the first hour. I remind you about them in hours 2 and 3. And I do that so that you feel as good as I do. 4 miles yesterday up and down the hill. And it was a good day, even though, I didn't wear sweatsuits yesterday. I was smart enough to put shorts and a collared shirt on because it was nasty out there. It's just the Santa Ana El Diablos are blowing. But Relief Factor, you need it, whether they are not. Coming back with Dr. Michael Oren. He's somewhere in the States. I hope he's awake.
Streaming on Salem Now.
¿Cuánto queda?
No queda nada. Que lo siento mucho.
That's the only time you can come to Christ. When the Spirit of God calls you to the cross, don't you hesitate.
Have you ever thought of going to seminary?
Madre, padre, ¿quién está listo para ser transformado por el poder de su palabra?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery.
He said, listen, I gotta give these niggas enough. Not too much, but enough that I'll have them voting Democrat for the next 200 years.
The race grievance industry would have you believe that blacks get up and think about nothing else except race.
If I tell you this is racist, yeah, I would get you emotional.
There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, 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 racist. Everything's racist. It's the devil!
Streaming on Salem Now.
As Galileans, we witnessed his first miracle. He warned us that a time of great deception would come. But we must hold on to our faith. That one day he would return to save us from the end of the world.
What if there was evidence that proves that this is all real?
Because there were so many people bringing up little bits and pieces of this. I'm thinking, there's got to be a pattern here. This discovery proves that he is coming back.
This is the most profound discovery in human history.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Welcome back, America. Dr. Michael Oren, former Israeli ambassador to the United States, former deputy minister of Israel, is in the States, I believe. Good morning, Michael. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good in not quite sunny Florida. I'm good.
Not quite sunny Florida and very early. I appreciate your getting up. Normally when I talk to you in Israel, it's like the middle of the afternoon, you're taking a nap. So this is very nice of you to get up early. Michael Oren, what is going on with these Iran talks? The American media actually doesn't have a good grip, I think, on what is happening.
Listen, nobody has a good grip. You get a gut feeling. The gut feeling is that they're almost there. And there means an agreement which is significantly worse than the 2015 JCPOA. And I think that the administration is going to try to explain it by saying this is not our fault, it's Trump's fault, we were dealt a bad hand, and we had no choice but to agree to a bad agreement that will endanger Israel, endanger the entire Middle East, eventually will endanger the entire world.
What is in there's sanctions relief? Ned Price at the State Department tried to talk his way out of this, but Matt Lee at AP wouldn't let him. This is a giveaway. They are crippled. They have crippling sanctions on them. Are we going to remove those sanctions?
Well, they already started removing the sanctions on the so-called civilian aspects of the Iranian nuclear program. I don't know what the civilian aspects are, because Iran is an oil and energy exporter. It doesn't really need atomic civilian energy. Where do you make the distinction? And so they're lifting sanctions already on that. They get nothing in return. Zero. No Iranian sanctions. I want to know in what universe you think you can relieve sanctions on Iran, get nothing in return, and then expect to get more concessions from Iran. It's only one universe in which that happens, Hugh, and that's a universe in which we have negotiations who are willing to do anything.
Oh, no, it's Wendy Sherman's world. It's Wendy Sherman's world. I went to the Aspen Institute 3 years ago. It was a JCPOA wake with Tony Blinken and Wendy Sherman. Last time I'm going to that thing, the Aspen Institute's gone completely over the left wing. But they just bemoaned the JCPOA. It crippled Iran. The Trump administration crippled Iran. Now, giving them back all of their money and taking off sanctions, they're actually bringing the Middle East closer to war, aren't they?
Well, first of all, they're going to, with the sanction money, and it can come to hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars of sanction relief and transactions. And we all know that the Iranians aren't going to build, houses and homes and hospitals and schools with that money. They're going to use it to build more rockets, more offensive capabilities, probably a better warhead, and increase the range of their intercontinental ballistic missiles. In 10 years, they'll be able to reach the eastern seaboard of the United States. That's what they'll do. And by the way, this has all been borne out by experience. This is not prophecy.
No, they just released pictures of their new missile, Dr. Oren. The Iranians are quite proud they can now hit every American installation in the Middle East.
Yeah, they can also hit installations in Paris at this point.
So tell me,
it's actually the same rocket.
Oh, wow. Doesn't this mean that they're actually bringing Israel closer to the brink, and therefore Israel under, is it Article 51 or 52 of the UN Charter, have a right to strike?
Yeah, but when does the UN ever recognize our right to strike? Do you know that the UN Security Council, in its 80 years of existence, has only met one time, to discuss aggression against Israel? Every time it's met on an Israeli issue, it's always been aggression by Israel. Only once. And that was in 2015 when Nikki Haley convened the Security Council to discuss aggression against Israel. One time. I wouldn't rely on Article whatever it is, the UN, to hide behind when we have to defend ourselves.
I think it's Article 51, but what I would just say is Article 51, you don't need the Security Council to confirm it. When you signed the deal, you got the deal, the right to self-defense. Iran threatens your existence. Does Bennett have the spine to do what needs to be done if it has to be done?
I hope so. And it's not just Bennett, because under our Israeli political system, the prime minister is not the commander-in-chief. The entire government is the commander-in-chief. Within that government, there's the Inner Security Council. People usually have some kind of connection to security, former generals, former police, and they have to make that decision. And it is going to be one of the weightier decisions ever in the history of the state of Israel.
When does that group meet, Dr. Oren? How often do they get together and study the data?
Well, when they have to, which is frequently, unfortunately. There's the terrorist attack yesterday in Jerusalem. And so they meet, and they meet with senior military and security officials. They get briefings. and they make decisions. And they make decisions about the number of Palestinian workers who come in to work every day. There's been a great spate of terrorist attacks. So it is that body makes the decision.
Key question, Michael Oren, last one of this week. Does Israel have the capacity to set back the Iranian nuclear program decisively for a matter of years, not months, but years?
I believe we do. And there are those in Washington who will say, well, you only set them back 3 years. 3 years is a long time in the Middle East, Hugh. 3 years passed before both the Syrians and the Iraqis began to even think about renewing their military nuclear programs, and then they never did after we bombed them.
I also think 3 years will get you out of the Biden administration, get rid of Wendy Sherman and Tony Blinken. So Israel being pushed into confrontation by virtue of the appeasement of the Biden administration. Dr. Michael Oren, keep coming back. Enjoy your time in the States. I'll be right back. Hour number 2, America, coming up on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
Could you let that happen for 10 weeks of your children being kept in a box in the library, excluded, put on display, and so on and so forth for that long? I kind of feel like, and I can tell you're a very caring mom, which is why you're bringing this public, but I kind of feel like that would happen for 2 hours, and I would be down there at that school and pulling my kid out, much less 2 to 10 weeks. Did they really endure that for that long?
They really did that for that long, and I really appreciate that question, and I've gotten that question a lot. And how we looked at it as a family is we could pull them and just go about our lives, and they'll just do this to someone else, or we could stay and fight and hold our ground. And my kids didn't want to leave that school. They've been in that school, my son, since 1st grade to 8th grade. They had their friends there. We still had hope that the trusted adults would do the right thing, and we eventually have pulled them to homeschool. But during those weeks, we were fighting. We have hundreds of emails to the administration, the Dallas ISD School Board. We went down, and I brought 30 or 40 grandmas and grandpas and other parents from other schools down to fight and speak on our behalf. Parents even scheduled protests, 3 protests outside the school. So we were fighting, but I think at this point in our country, the war has come into the family, and our kids can no longer be shielded from it. They need to be guided through it, which we did as a family, to build a backbone and learn how to stand up and fight, because this is their next generation. So instead of shielding them from it, we help them move through it with grace, integrity, and dignity, and they came out stronger.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
You called your son, and you personally promised him you would be here.
Prayer is a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work, if you believe.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
This is Hugh Hewitt for townhall.com. Buckle up for 2022. The year in politics is going to be rough. The midterm election year seems predestined to banish the Democratic majorities in both houses of Congress. The country senses infirmity in President Biden, and many worry that our adversaries in China, Russia, and Iran sense that opening too. The shadow campaign for the GOP nomination in 2024 opens now, with the clear frontrunner being former President Donald Trump. The ranks of the top tier among possible GOP presidential nominees in alphabetical order starts with 2 senators, Arkansas's Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz of Texas. Then we have the populist Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, the former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. If the world grows even darker in the days to come, Cotton and Pompeo, 2 former soldiers, start with some advantages. It's possible one or more will run whether or not the former president does. My bet with 3 years to go is that Trump runs, and runs hard. Buckle up. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
And there goes Peter Dinklage beating the crap out of Will Ferrell for calling him an angry elf. I mean, listen, he's certainly not an elf, but he's an angry guy. You know, I hate to put everything in a political perspective here, but isn't it true? And I assume Peter Dinklage is no conservative. He's woke. He wants to cancel Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Why do they always want to cancel everything? You know, they want to cancel everything. What do conservatives believe in? We are for things. Biden's always saying, "Why are Republicans for that for anything?" Yes, we're for everything. We're for people. We're for people's right to make decisions about their health. We're for movies. We're for different views on the airwaves. We're not for people being canceled or movies being canceled or things being canceled. We're for things. And your side, Biden, is against everything. You're against Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Oh, I mean, Disney obviously taking it seriously because they're redoing the whole movie, I guess. Seriously, what do you portray them as children? Should child actors play the Seven Dwarfs? You're going to get little Billy or Susie, who's about 9? The Seven Dwarfs in Snow White aren't children. Grumpy isn't a kid. I mean, in fact, that would be a great, if they're casting people, maybe Peter Dinklage can play Grumpy. Because he'd fit right in.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
So I think in their strategy meeting, they said, okay, people say that Joe Biden's mental decline is impacting his ability to govern. Let's shoot Joe up with whatever sort of kind of adrenaline that is necessary and deploy him out there. I think the point was to try to show that Joe Biden was going to go over the top long, to try to win kudos and praise from the establishment media. This is his first press conference I think he's done in quite some time. Some people said it was his first ever press conference as president. Second? Okay. That was his second press conference. Trump used to do these almost daily. He did them for fun. And I will say, for reasons that we can speculate, the media was pretty critical. They were direct, precise. Now, nowhere even in the ecosystem, nowhere even in the atmosphere of questions towards Donald Trump. And I agree with my friend Tucker Carlson. The press conference was totally weird. It was a strange deal. Joe Biden leaning in. He does this thing where he kind of like hunches over the podium. You notice that, Connor? And he kind of puts both of his arms down and he looks directly at the reporter. And then he whispers. You're exactly right. And he was still calling from a pre-selected list of reporters. And there were multiple blunders that came out of that. But if the point was to try to show the nation, look at, hey, if you have any concerns about how sharp this guy is mentally, I mean, come on. He stood there and talked for 2 hours. I don't think that mission was accomplished.
Keep up. Streaming on Salem Now.
This is a story of how 1 million children were placed with local foster families through an unlikely alliance between the Chinese government and a British footballer. Parents from all walks of life share their stories of overcoming the one-child policy by taking in orphans. With unprecedented access across the country, this is a unique insight into the lives of the 90s orphans now driving the 21st century's fastest growing economy.
This story needs to be told across the world. At a time where there's so much negativity and cynicism, here's proof that a single leap of faith can change the world.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
morning, glory America, bonjour, hi Canada. Hugh Hewitt from the West Coast today, live. And the Santa Anas are blowing, and it's 82 degrees at John Wayne Airport in Orange County in the middle of the night. It's really going to be a hot Super Bowl. I forgot to tell you in the last segment that the Cavaliers crushed the San Antonio Spurs last night. Sorry, K-Loop in San Antonio, but the Cavs are better than Popovich's team. At 34-21, the Cavs are only one game out of the NBA East. It's unbelievable. Just watch the miracle Cavs. Joined now by Leland Vitter. He is a host at News Nation. And good morning, Leland. How are you?
Hey, Hugh. Good to see you.
Good to see you. I asked for you specifically because of all the correspondents in America. I think you're the only one who's actually been on the ground in the Donbass. Weren't you in Ukraine for the first round of this thing?
I was. I spent a month there for the invasion of the Little Green Men and the Russian GRU folks into the Donbass, which is the eastern part of Ukraine, back in 2014. This is right before Putin shot down the airliner and kept denying that he had people there, but then you were seeing Russian tanks rolling around, so go figure.
So Leland, what I want to get from you is an American's understanding of what the Ukrainians think is going on. If you spend 30 days anywhere, you actually get to know the people. What do the people of Ukraine think is on Putin's mind?
Well, the people of Ukraine, I think you have to think of it a little bit like the people of America. And in a way, the Donbass is a little bit like, say, the southern part of Texas, right on the border. A lot of the people who are in the Donbass, the area that Putin is going to roll into first, are ethnically Russian. So a number of them support the Russians. Now, some of them believe that they're both Ukrainian and Russian, but there's a group that's pro-Russian. The larger part of Ukraine is terrified because they know that Vladimir Putin views losing Ukraine as one of the great tragedies of the 20th century. It was the fall of the Soviet Empire, which Vladimir Putin viewed as one of the great creations of our time and of our world. So they realize that Putin is a man to take seriously. When he says he wants something back, he's probably willing to use force to get it. The other thing they know is that Putin, in a way, is a coward and that he is a bully. And bullies respond to force. And that's why you're seeing so much brinksmanship from the Ukrainians. It almost sounds like President Biden is more scared of an invasion by Vladimir Putin than the Ukrainians are. And that is a calculated move by the Ukrainians to try to send a message to Putin.
Now, I'm sure you're following this as the anchor of News Nation, but yesterday the three leading Russian generals blew into Belarus, from which military exercises are underway. They could be in Kyiv in 72 hours if they launch from Belarus. Can you see that happening? Leland, can you see that happening? Would you expect them to actually go for the throat? Uh-oh. Leland's left the screen. Leland has left the screen. It's a terrible thing that happens. He's got the Civil War, though, Shelby Foote behind him. Oh, that's pretty cool, Leland. Did he have it? Did he fall over? Something happened. Oh, well, he'll come back. When you do these Skype interviews, if you got the Salem News Channel, that was pretty good. But something happened. Maybe a child entered the room. You think that might have happened? That is usually what happens when we Skype with people. All right, I do want to go back to what's going on in the Donbass when Leland rejoins us. Watch News Nation every night. He's very, very good at this. Iran unveiled a new missile said to put Israel-U.S. regional bases within range yesterday. I just discussed that with Michael Oren in the last hour. Putin is pushing at Ukraine. China is destroying the Uyghurs and suppressing Hong Kong. What does that tell you about the Biden administration? What do all those stories tell you about the Biden administration? One thing and only one thing.
Please leave a message.
That nobody respects them abroad. That, Wendy, what do you want more from the United States Chairman is abroad in the world, giving away whatever the Iranians want, giving the Russians what they want, giving the Chinese what they want. John Kerry is abroad in the world asking for emission reductions, which I think even... Oh, you're back. Leland, you're back.
Hey, the power of a phone call over Skype and the ring light and AirPods.
What I loved about it, though, is when you got up, I got to see you have Shelby Foote behind you on the bookshelf in that studio. So that's a pretty good home studio. So, Leland, the key part is if those Russian generals appearing in Belarus portend a march to Kyiv, What do you think will be the reaction on the ground in Ukraine?
They're going to fight because they don't have a choice, and that's why you're seeing the level of sort of calculated strength from the Ukrainians. They don't want to inflame the situation with Putin, but they have to let him know that there is going to be a real price paid in Russian lives. Why is that important? They remember what President Trump did, and for whatever you think of President Trump's foreign policy, he's responsible for more dead Russians than any president since Ronald Reagan. And you remember when there was U.S. forces in Syria, the Russians, a Russian mercenary group, which is sort of Putin's personal army, started marching towards the U.S. forces, and the U.S. kept calling the Russian generals and said, call these guys back, you need, please don't attack us, on and on and on. The Russians kept saying, these aren't our guys. We don't have anything to say about them. And then all of a sudden, the U.S. opened fire and killed 300 Russians and did not lose a single American. That really hurt Vladimir Putin back at home. And he was so embarrassed about it, they wouldn't even acknowledge that it happened. But every time Vladimir Putin is made to pay a serious price, he backs down. And that's why you're seeing the strength from the Ukrainians, and that's why you're also seeing Putin continue to be like the guy at the bar who keeps saying, hold me back, hold me back, hold me back, hold me back. He wants the spoils of war without actually having war.
Now, when my daughter was young, she made 2 mission trips to Kyiv in high school. And I heard that Kyiv is basically like Moscow, like every other city. Lots and lots of large apartment complexes, lots and lots of falling apart buildings, lots of Soviet-era disrepair. Will the roads support tank advance? I mean, I have no idea what Ukrainian infrastructure is like.
Ukrainian infrastructure is terrible, which is why this is happening right now, because the ground is all frozen. Eastern Ukraine is a little bit, say, like, Nebraska in a way. But
they don't have any football either? No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, sometimes the truth hurts, right?
Yeah.
But if you're moving across large parts of land with tanks and armor, roads get torn up. What's very helpful is frozen ground. And so right now the ground in eastern Ukraine and moving towards Kyiv is frozen. So you can move huge columns of armor across there. The window for that, obviously, is dependent on the weather, which is why everyone says, it could happen next week, is because once the ground thaws and it's mud and you can't move all the support equipment to move an army, suddenly that fight becomes really, really difficult, and it becomes a lot easier the advantage turns to the Ukrainians to play defense from the Russians to play offense and being able to move quickly.
And Leland, Vitter, when you were in Ukraine in 2014, prior to the invasion under Barack Obama, and you talked to Ukrainian troops, are they professional? Are they like talking to American soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines? Are they together and effective and efficient? I know they've deployed with NATO in Afghanistan. I know they have been in Iraq. What's your impression of Ukrainian military?
Great question. I would say that they are getting a lot better. When I was there, it was a pretty disheveled group, certainly brave and certainly patriotic, but very lacking in weapons, in the professional training that you'd expect from squared away Americans or Brits or even French forces. Their special forces weren't bad. They had trained with the United States, so they had a level of professionalism that was impressive. At least from what I have heard from people who've been over there and people who've worked with the Ukrainian army, is in the past 6 years or 8 years, the Ukrainians have known this was coming and have been preparing for it every day. So their military has stepped up. And you might remember President Obama was sending MREs and blankets and night vision to the Ukrainians to stop the Russians or help them stop the Russians. And then President Trump started sending Javelin anti-tank weapons, anti-aircraft radars, those kinds of things over. So the level of equipment and training has stepped way up by the Ukrainians. Another reason that Vladimir Putin is a little scared to go in is all of a sudden the Ukrainians start blowing up Russian tanks that doesn't really play well back home in St. Petersburg.
And there will be film at 11. I got to tell you, Leland, you're the only guy I know on television who's actually been to the Donbass for 30 days. What were the hotels like?
Actually, quite nice, believe it or not.
That's it. That we'll follow up on that because I'm kind of surprised by that. Leland Vitter, News Nation Now. Watch him tonight. Follow him on Twitter at Leland Vitter. Come right back to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Thank you, Leland.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
This is Hugh Hewitt for townhall.com. Buckle up for 2022. The year in politics is going to be rough. The midterm election year seems predestined.
Prayer is a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work, if you believe.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
This is Hugh Hewitt for townhall.com. Buckle up for 2022. The year in politics is going to be rough. The midterm election year seems predestined to banish the Democratic majorities in both houses of Congress. The country senses infirmity in President Biden, and many worry that our adversaries in China, Russia, and Iran sense that opening too. The shadow campaign for the GOP nomination in 2024 opens now, with the clear frontrunner being former President Donald Trump. The ranks of the top tier among possible GOP presidential nominees in alphabetical order starts with two senators, Arkansas's Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz of Texas. Then we have the populist Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, the former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. If the world grows even darker in the days to come, Cotton and Pompeo, two former soldiers, start with some advantages. It's possible one or more will run whether or not the former president does. My bet, with 3 years to go, is that Trump runs, and runs hard. Buckle up. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
Look at you! Ow! Hey, look at that! I wasn't ready for that.
And there goes Peter Dinklage beating the crap out of Will Ferrell for calling him an angry elf. I mean, listen, he's certainly not an elf, but he's an angry guy. You know, I hate to put everything in a political perspective here, but isn't it true? And I assume, Peter, and your side, Biden, is against everything. You're against Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Oh, I mean, Disney obviously taking it seriously because they're redoing the whole movie, I guess. Seriously, what do you portray them as children? Should child actors play the Seven Dwarfs? You going to get little Billy or Susie, who's about 9? The Seven Dwarfs in Snow White aren't children. Grumpy isn't a kid. I mean, in fact, that would be a great, if they're casting people, maybe Peter Dinklage can play Grumpy. Because he'd fit right in.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening. People have begun to notice that crime is going crazy in the United States. Tom Cotton, senator from Arkansas, was on Fox with Brian Kilmeade yesterday talking about that cut number 2.
It was a year ago when the riots took over so many city streets and burned so many buildings and destroyed so many livelihoods, the Black Lives Matter rioters. And there was one in particular, a man was burned to death by one of them. Now, what has happened to that man thanks to the DOJ?
Well, this is a shocking development, Brian. Montez Lee burned a pawn shop to the ground. So he's guilty of arson,
He's also guilty of murder because there was a man burned alive in that building, a father of 5. He was charged with arson in the federal courts. That carries a 20-year sentence. The Department of Justice, the United States Department of Justice, sought barely half that because they said he was participating in a peaceful riot, in a peaceful protest, that he was giving voice to the unheard, that his cause was righteous. It is completely inappropriate for the Department of Justice to be meting out criminal punishment based on their view of the criminal's political positions. I mean, this is not some crazy Soros prosecutor in San Francisco or New York or Los Angeles. This is the United States Department of Justice reducing sentences for an arsonist who killed a man because they liked the cause for which he was protesting when he committed that arson. This is outrageous. Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice needs to answer for it.
Now, the second part that he went to, Tom Cotton, in the same interview, talked about the weakness, the provocative weakness of the Biden administration and the consequences of the Afghanistan withdrawal playing out. Cut number 3.
Senator Tom Cotton served in Afghanistan. Senator, up until 3 days before Kabul fell, that's when Anthony Blinken said, we better pick up the timetable if we're going to empty our embassy. I mean, do you believe the ineptness that we witnessed?
Well, it'd be hard to believe, Brian, except we all saw it play out with our own eyes. That Army report is accurate. I can tell you in real time last year on both the Armed Services and Intelligence Committee, as we monitored what the Army was doing as well as what the CIA was doing, they foresaw that the security situation was deteriorating rapidly. They did a pretty good job of getting their own people out, but they were only responsible for their own people. It's the State Department that's responsible for all American citizens and green card holders and all those Afghans who served alongside of our troops for so long. And they obviously failed catastrophically. And that's why you saw the chaotic scenes in Kabul last August, why we had those service members killed by a suicide bomber, and why we left behind thousands of American citizens and green card holders and Afghans who served alongside us. The State Department still has no plan to help get them out. They mostly just want to sweep it under the rug so they can turn the page on what was a very dark chapter in our government's history.
We also learned about a skirmish between our Marines and Taliban, but I didn't really know about in those days. Remember President Biden said for the longest time they weren't attacking us because they knew we were leaving? Oops.
Yeah, it's becoming increasingly clear that a lot of what Joe Biden and a lot of what Tony Blinken were saying in the run-up to the fall of Kabul, and even as Kabul was falling in its immediate aftermath, just simply was not telling the truth to the American people. It's trying to cover up for their gross mismanagement of that crisis.
100% correct by Tom Cotton. I am glad on both points that he's speaking out. Let me turn now to the andrewandtodd.com update of markets. Everything is green overseas, so I don't know what that means for America today. We usually lead, we don't follow, but the inflation numbers are expected. The Wall Street Journal reporting moments ago that the economists surveyed by the Journal expect a 7.2% inflation rate in January. This is crushing America. This is just crushing America. And it's the Biden inflation. There's no getting away from it. And it's going to hit homes. So right now I've got in my hand yesterday's Wall Street Journal. In COVID-19 housing market, the middle class is getting priced out. The dream of home ownership has grown more out of reach for middle class owners during the pandemic, according to the Wall Street Journal. andrewandtodd.com will help you prevent that. This market report brought to you by andrewandtodd.com. They are sponsors of the show. Sierra Pacific Mortgage is the lender that they are with. They lend you the money. They do not find you a bank. They are actually lenders. And they take you soup to nuts. So when you call 888-1172, you get connected up with Andrew or Todd or one of their team, or you can go online to andrewandtodd.com. Look, it's only going to get more expensive. Bite the bullet, get the house, and do it now. andrewandtodd.com. Come right back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, and by the way, you'll see me on Special Report tonight. Want to make a note?
The Hugh Hewitt Show is now available on TV. Go to salemnewschannel.com or download the app. You can also watch on Roku and Fire Stick. Salem News Channel, the antidote to the mainstream media.
Powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized to go after perceived domestic enemies. And that's very scary.
Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power.
We are now all rooting for his success. The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy.
We don't live in the United States of America as is any of us would like to understand it.
We have a peaceful transition of power process. That's not what happened.
They interviewed General Flynn, and they did it in what was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russian interference.
They colluded. They were in on it.
He would constantly say, I have seen evidence of collusion.
Until this is released, I can't comment.
I can't go into the particulars.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific.
But he knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
Well, it's classified. You can't see it. Collusion. You just got to be willing to see it.
New York's Daily News ran this front page, Trump is Hitler.
How could 62 million Americans vote for Hitler? Are 62 million Americans Nazis?
We really almost thought it was a joke. Like, really, you're not going to accept that you lost this election?
Then they see the Russia collusion narrative sitting right there in front of them and say, why don't we just say that he cheated?
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want because they literally feel like they're fighting Russian spies and Nazis.
Russiagate has been the most egregious abuse of everything that was supposed to have been good about our government.
The thing that they were investigating the Trump campaign for is what they themselves were doing.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Operations who find that they have this concept that loosely translated English means big help with a little bad mouth. And basically what that means is they're willing to allow people they do deals with in Congress, the Biden family, on Capitol Hill, Wall Street. They're willing to allow those individuals to provide some criticism because they recognize that it maintains credibility for those individuals.
Wow.
What they don't want, Dennis, is for them to sort of go to the third rail, which is number one, cut off Chinese access to Western capital markets and restrict the flow of technology, not stolen technology, but technology given to China. They don't want those two elements stopped.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
100,000 of them were children, when the data shows that only 5 children are hospitalized out of every 100,000 hospitalizations. There was maybe 6 kids in the hospital, none of them on ventilators that I could find.
6, 100,000. Who's counting? Hey, we're all about all about grace. We're all about grace,
and
bro.
it's a whole consistent pattern, Eric, that they used to do kind of in the shade. They would make more implications than direct statements. They wouldn't campaign on things that were factually false. The left has lost its rooting, its mooring, anything that's holding it.
But how many people do we know in the evangelical church who do not give a damn about this? They absolutely don't seem to understand that when leaders lie, when they do these kinds of things, it hurts people. It usually hurts poor people the most. And we have many in the evangelical church who have absolutely turned a blind eye. Again, this rises to levels unprecedented in American life. I mean, it's one thing to say we have differences. This is a level of political theater, of lying and grandstanding that is so pernicious to the fabric of the republic.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
We continue to recommend masking in areas of high and substantial transmission. That's much of the country right now in public indoor settings. And so we're, of course, taking a close look at this in real time, and we're evaluating rates of transmission as well as rates of severe outcomes as we look at updating and reviewing our guidance.
Does anybody care what Rochelle Walensky and Anthony Fauci say anymore? Jim Geraghty of National Review has covered this like nobody else. Joins me. Good morning, Jim. What do you think?
Hugh, look at the bright side. She's no longer getting on a crystal ball. She's no longer saying that she has heard from the spirits, or that she has this vision of doom coming upon us, as she was doing, I think it was probably right around last spring, right before cases really, really went down and we had our best stretch and things were at their very best. There's been this, Walensky, I'll start out by saying something nice and saying she's got a really tough job. Sometimes the data isn't crystal clear. She's trying to placate a bunch of different constituencies, and when she says something like schools can operate safely very early in the Biden administration, there's always a chance that Jen Psaki will come out and completely cut the legs out from under her and say, oh, that's just her personal opinion. She's just speaking in her personal capacity, not as director of the CDC.
So Jim,
with all that in mind,
yeah, go ahead.
She's pretty darn bad at this job. The public communication job is really, really, she's just botching it completely.
And Anthony Fauci's worse because he's run through the seed corn. He ate the seed corn. Now, the question is, what is going on in the country that the Beltway doesn't understand? Because Glenn Youngkin did a victory lap on Sean Hannity last night. They got a big win in Virginia. The legislature in a bipartisan rolled back mask mandates. Democrat governors are running away from mask mandates. Everyone has recognized it is a nightmare for anyone on the ballot in the fall, and I don't think it's too late to change that. But what is the disconnect?
Well, first thing is that Walensky and Fauci and Francis Collins. I guess he's departed NIH, but pardon me, doing so much better as you can tell, Hugh.
Yeah. How are you feeling, by the way?
Those folks don't face voters. They can make any edict or make any recommendation they like. No one's ever going to vote Rochelle Walensky out of office. So, on paper, that's a good thing. On paper, they don't have to worry about being popular. The bad news is that the other thing is that the kinds of people who choose to become public health experts, the kinds of people who choose to become virologists and epidemiologists and folks like that, they're not the people who go skydiving on the weekends. They already have exceptionally low tolerance for risk. As I'm going through, I'm writing today's Morning Jolt as we speak, Hugh.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so the NBC News reporter who was going around saying everything is open, what are you people complaining about? Why are you griping about having to wear a mask to Cracker Barrel or something like that? By the way, the counties that have Cracker Barrel are probably the ones that don't have mask mandates.
Yep.
That's the first observation. But the second thing is that he says everything is open. Not really. There are fewer government edicts telling people you cannot do this, this is not open, things like that. But if you talk to anybody who's in the event planning business, or you look at collegiate athletic events, Omicron has forced a lot of cancellations. And just over the course of this, just a quick Google search, science conferences, live theater performances all over Broadway, local festivals, charity walks, mixed martial arts competitions, piano recitals, symphony orchestra performances, cruises, the USA World Swimming Championships, and state legislative meetings. Over the past 2 months, Omicron has been canceling things left and right. Now, this may be entirely necessary or wise, but whenever he's like, oh, things are back to normal, what do you go? No, things are not back to normal. They're not even close to back to normal. That's where we're going through the Omicron phase. So this idea of, why are people whining? Why are people complaining? Because they elected a guy who said, I'm not going to shut down the country. I'm not going to shut down the economy. I'm going to shut down the virus. And yet here we are. The virus is not shut down. And you look at supply chain problems and inflation, people might feel like, actually, it does feel like the economy's kind of shut down.
Okay, this is my transition story, but the Super Bowl is this weekend. LA is filling up with unmasked athletes and superstars and celebrity, and it's just the typical Super Bowl magnified on steroids because it's in LA, and nobody's wearing a mask. I mean, California's done. And I was in Laguna Beach this weekend. Laguna Beach is done, and Laguna Beach bans everything. So what is the disconnect? Things might be being canceled by risk-averse people, but America is done. They have decided that you have a chance to get a vaccine and a booster. Yep. You have a chance to make a decision. Kids are not going to put up with this anymore. I just think the Virginia vote shows They're done. It was not even close in the Virginia Senate, which is a Democrat majority Senate.
Yeah, 10 Democratic senators basically went along and said, okay, we're all right with letting parents decide for themselves. 9 Democratic state senators went the other way. And I, saying, yes, we want to keep this in place. And rarely, as I wrote yesterday in the Morning Jolt, rarely do you see a state party's leadership that is not just out of touch with public opinion as a whole, which is, pretty bad, but they weren't even in touch with the actual mood of their own rank and file members in the state legislature. Like, you should be losing your job.
You should. Chap Peterman, who is the Democrat senator from Arlington, came on the show last week. He said, no, we're not doing this anymore, and the school districts have to wake up. And so they have looked at some polling. I just have to assume that Democrats have figured out from their constituents and from mothers and from, in fact, I got another one I got to play for you today. This is a Naperville, Illinois parent. Yeah, we got enough time. Let's play this for Jim Geraghty, a Naperville, Illinois parent at a school board meeting, cut number 19.
I am here for my daughter, and beyond anything else, she loves school. The harm you have done to her, she still loves school. She loves her teachers, her therapists, her helpers, above all, her principal at Scott School. Her team goes above and beyond for her. Her LBS has gone to the moon and back for her. She's a happy and outgoing girl. And the countless positive and influential people that have helped her along the way, her team and her principal at Scott School have been such great role models to her. Her dream is to work there someday. She talks nothing else than wanting to be a teacher or wanting to go to school and be and work at school. I can only name a few people in her life that have harmed her and actively participated in holding her back and stopping her progress, and almost every one of them is in this room tonight. The past 2 years have been shameful as the district has been busy lauding themselves while they enact policies that have absolutely been devastating to her growth. We have seen 2 years of almost no growth, missed goals removed. Her team is doing everything that they can. We've hired specialists. She still loves school. My 10-year-old daughter has kept these feelings to herself about how much she desperately wants to take her mask off. When we told her that it may be possible on Monday, she cried, tears. She jumped up and down. She told us that she was so excited that people may finally be able to understand her. You have harmed her so much with this. Everybody talks about everybody's got to be safe. Everybody's got to have everything. And we've left so many children behind. We've tried to protect her. This morning, she got up before us and she started singing a song to her dolls about how excited she was that kids were finally going to be able to see her smile, that she was going to be able to see other kids' smiles, that kids would be able to understand her, and she would stop being picked on because they could not understand her through her mask, because her speech has been delayed even more than her special needs. She is a strong girl, but when I heard her do that, and I heard the things that she said, it broke me. I will never forgive myself for not fighting more.
Jim Geraghty, this is not an isolated incident. The people who think that we are going to forget by November and 2024 are wrong.
Correct, Hugh. And let me just observe, I think every single American, every single child in America deserves the right to communicate clearly and directly and with nothing obstructing them, the same way that Stacey Abrams deserved in that elementary school classroom down in Georgia.
Exactly.
Like the interesting thing is that, Stacey Abrams said, well, look, I had to do it because I was speaking to the kids, and there were some kids who were remotely. That's why it was important for me not to wear a mask. But it wasn't. But she couldn't understand that anybody else could ever have that same need to communicate clearly with anybody else. It was spectacular, the example there.
Now, Jim, how are you doing? You're recovering from COVID. How are you doing?
I'm fine.
All right.
Honest to goodness, the self-isolation was tougher than the actual. Probably by the time we talked last week, Thursday, Friday, I was feeling significantly better. But I could not get that little pink line on the instant test to go away until Tuesday.
Okay.
So, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, I'm just, feeling about 80-90% of what I'm feeling. And,
So I love talking to you because it's like talking to my daughter who has kids in school. So I get a direct line to kids in school. Your boys don't mind it so much. What's the deal? Are people taking off their masks yet, or are they waiting?
I don't know what the circumstance of that, of the parent you just played the audio of. But one of the I was quizzing my sons on this, and they pointed out they don't have to wear their masks during lunch, because you got to eat. And my older son, they have pretty laid back rules for who sits with who. My younger son, they still are seating, and they have assigned seats. But at that point, it sounds like in that time period, the teachers and the school policies are more relaxed. So they at least have one stretch of the day where they get to take their masks off and see each other and act somewhat normally. Now, here's the thing. If they're doing that and the schools are not exploding with cases, why couldn't they do that in class?
Oh, Jim, I got to tell you about my granddaughter who rides a bus every day. And all day long, they are sliced and diced, and they have screens up and masks on. Then they all jam, because they don't have enough bus drivers, they sit 3 to a seat without seat belts and no masks, driving home. It's just absolutely, and my daughter, who's, it's just really stupid. And America's really stupid about, school districts, they're going to get crushed.
As Bill Bennett said, we're not good at that. The best, I don't know if you have time, Hugh, but one terrific
go ahead.
last final, contrast there. For a while, Marin County, and of course it's Marin County out in California, but they were my favorite example in that they were capping the capacity for watching school athletic events. I think it was 10%, 25%. It was much smaller than usual. And now at the same time, you just go a little bit further down south from Marin County into San Francisco. Golden State Warriors are playing, and you can pack tens of thousands of people in their arena. And yes, it's a slightly bigger arena, but why is it? No, if we have parents watching their kids, playing basketball in high school, well, everybody's going to die. That's going to look like the medieval plagues. But no, Golden State Warriors. You want to watch Steph Curry? Come on in.
Come on in. We got to make some money, and those season tickets are held by the corporate elite of San Francisco. I got to tell you, James, we're going to get a history of this. Gosh, I hope I live long enough to get a history of this. Because everything that we could do wrong, we did wrong through 2 administrations because we did not trust a free people to make decisions for themselves.
Yeah, I was very interested when the Fauci used the term, we're out of the full-blown stage of the pandemic. I suppose around December or November, December, Omicron is spreading. Everybody is trying to, they just got together for Thanksgiving. Everybody wants to get together for Christmas. Everybody's, that tickle in the back of my throat. Is it cold? Is it flu? Is it COVID-19? Boy, I'd really love to have an instant test. Nobody can find any instant tests. Hugh, that wasn't the full-blown pandemic. Was that the moderately blown?
That was the moderately blown. Jim, let me conclude by saying Dr. Fauci and Dr. Walensky have as much capacity to persuade the public on Omicron and what to do as I do on which technology to acquire and how to operate it. That's exactly the level of credibility that they have. I'll be doing car repair next. Jim Geraghty, the indispensable. Go sign up for the Morning Jolt at nationalreview.com. Go get your relieffactor.com as well. There it is, America. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you can see the brilliant North Carolina blue. That's me stretching. There's a man and a woman stretching. I'm the profile of the guy stretching there with my arms up. I actually never stretch. I'm 65. I've been running for 45 years, and I never stretch. And so LeBron James thinks I should be dead or something like that. But I do take relieffactor.com, and I encourage you to take relieffactor.com, and I encourage everyone out there who's getting older, which would be just about everybody who's listening here, unless you're, what's the name of the guy in the movie who goes backwards? Come on, somebody, help me out. He was played by Brad Pitt. No, it's not Jim Talent. It's Jim Talent's up next. It's the Button guy.
Benjamin Button.
Benjamin Button. He needed a relief factor, too. Stay with us.
Tesla was a genius. His most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century, but in the wrong hands, kill him. Jump.
If you can stop an earthquake,
Doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
There's an old brown battered notebook in my office at work. You have to find it, take it, and keep it hidden at all costs. The G20 leaders meeting downtown, they're in danger. In fact, the whole of downtown could be in danger.
If we are to build a superhuman, we must first eliminate those who are flawed.
People are created equally. All of downtown, the high-rises were built on rollers to withstand horizontal shakes. A vertical quake this size could collapse half of downtown.
We have commenced the countdown.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Sometimes there are policies so destructive that at first you don't believe they're true. Joe Biden is currently defending one, his plan to award $450,000 to migrants separated from their families after entering the U.S. illegally. Children of deceased U.S. soldiers are separated from their parents permanently. They don't receive this kind of money. And migrants who enter the U.S. legally certainly don't get this kind of payout. The really big jackpot, it seems, is being reserved for the lawbreakers. There are some obvious truths here. First, behavior that's subsidized gets repeated. Joe Biden is effectively inviting many more illegal immigrants to breach America's open borders. Second, he's betting over time the payoffs will benefit his party in political terms. Meanwhile, the vast majority of Americans watch in shock and dismay as our president, the country's chief law enforcement officer, brazenly rewards lawbreaking, a clear violation of his oath to defend our nation's laws. It's a sorry sight indeed.
Streaming.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, joined by former United States Senator Jim Talent, now with the Bipartisan Policy Center. Jim has a new article column over at the National Review. China's Uyghur persecution is all part of its grand economic scheme, which I recommend to you. Good morning, Senator Talent. Welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be back.
I am cheered by the disaster that is the TV ratings of the genocide games. It appears to me that Americans are voting with their eyes and refusing to watch a game staged by a genocidal regime seeking a propaganda victory. Do you agree with my assessment?
Yeah, I really think that is at least part of it. I mean, there has to be some explanation because the ratings are much lower. And I think it's probably disgust that everybody feels about China in general. I don't know that it's focused on Xinjiang province and the Uyghurs, but just generally the way that Beijing is throwing its weight around in the region and in the world.
Well, I also believe that we fairly conclusively concluded that they poisoned the world and that the world is not happy with them. And they also know about the Uyghurs, and they know about Tibet, and they know about Hong Kong, and they know about Jimmy Lai. Basically, the brand damage to China is irreparable, I think.
Right, and they haven't shown a particular sensitivity to it, but it has not been, we have not organized it as the way we should, either on a government level or a civil society level. I think there's a level of that they would very much not want to have to take. In other words, really exploding their narrative, I think would be very effective in the competition.
Well, I do too, but that requires education first. And there's a lot of Wall Street interest still, Jim Talent, in not upsetting the economic bridge between China and the United States. Has that begun to crumble?
You know, I don't think so yet. The Chinese need American capital. I mean, they're even more highly leveraged than we are, although most of it, I think, technically you would say is corporate debt. Of course, in China, the difference between corporate debt and government debt, given the government's ownership and involvement in the economy, is very fuzzy. They also moved debt around on the books. They rotated around through their banking system, which is not really a banking system. It's government-owned and operated. And they need American capital, and they need American expertise in terms of how to manage, startups and growing companies. And they've invited Wall Street in, and unfortunately, Wall Street is going in. Now, always have to say it's in part because of either a confused or an absent government policy. I mean, average Americans, even on Wall Street, are not aware of the significance and importance of this. So we need a purposeful effort from the government.
Last question before I go to Ukraine quickly. Do you think people are familiar with the Theranos fraud? A big Silicon Valley scheme took in a lot of money, and the proprietor was just defrauding investors. Do you think China is basically the Theranos of national economies? Have they just been...
I may use that in the future, I'm very concerned about it, and I've said to, my former colleagues when I briefed them on this, on what's going on in China, because I'm a politician, I would not want to be in a position where all of a sudden a whole bunch of American, and particularly passive American investors, people, pensioners and that sort of thing, find out that their investments have gone up in smoke because the Chinese are so opaque about the workings of their companies. I mean, there's a sense in which it's all a giant racket. And so the interests of American investors are also at stake here, particularly, again, the passive investors who are not in a position to know the risks that are being run.
Right, they're invested in pension funds, et cetera, and the exposure to the Chinese economy is large and should be de minimis. Let's go to Ukraine. I had Leland Vitter on earlier. He expects the Ukrainians to fight hard and long. I think Putin's going in because this is a unique inflection moment of the West where we're just as weak as possible and Germany has left NATO. What do you think, Jim Talent?
Well, if I had to guess, I think he's going to do what President Biden said, called a more limited incursion. I think he's going to occupy the Donbass. You notice he's already put Russian forces formally into Belarus, and they were not there before. So that's one thing he's gained, and nobody's even noticed. I think he's going to occupy the Donbass. And I think he may use that as a basis for launching some air and missile attacks in the rest of Ukraine to destabilize the Ukrainian government, put pressure on them. I think he's probably concerned that if he goes in with a full-scale mechanized invasion, he risks uniting NATO and a really strong response. And one of the things he wants is to divide and eventually destroy NATO. So I think he'll take I think this is a case where the dictator will take, half the meal first and then see where he's at. But nobody really knows. And again, the aggressor has the initiative because we're weak and we're weak in the region and we've been weak in terms of how we've dealt with it.
Wendy, what would you like next for the United States? Sherman is abroad as well. And the Iranians are getting the deal of a century. They don't have to do anything and we give them sanctions relief.
Why in the world, particularly dealing with the Iranians, we make any deal where they do not have to perform up front is a great mystery to me. I mean, Obama did it. They're not going to do what they say they're going to do. I think that's about as safe a prediction as anybody could make.
Jim Talent, it's appeasement. I mean, you have 10 seconds. It's just plain old appeasement on our part.
Yes, and that we'll see how it hasn't worked in the past. I don't expect it to work now.
Jim Talent on Twitter with the Bipartisan Policy Center, his new National Review column, China's Uyghur persecution is all part of its grand economic scheme, is at nationalreview.com. Come back, hour number 3 coming up. This is Hugh Hewitt for townhall.com. Buckle up for 2022. The year in politics is going to be rough. The midterm election year seems predestined to banish the Democratic majorities in both houses of Congress. The country senses infirmity in President Biden, and many worry that our adversaries in China, Russia, and Iran sense that opening too. The shadow campaign for the GOP nomination in 2024 opens now, with the clear frontrunner being former President Donald Trump. The ranks of the top tier among possible GOP presidential nominees in alphabetical order starts with 2 senators, Arkansas's Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz of Texas. Then we have the populist Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, the former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. If the world grows even darker in the days to come, Cotton and Pompeo, two former soldiers, start with some advantages. It's possible one or more will run whether or not the former president does. My bet with 3 years to go is that Trump runs and runs hard. Buckle up. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
What the Supreme Court has said is you have to have a compelling state interest, and the compelling state interest that the Supreme Court found was the benefits that flow from having a diverse student body, whatever those benefits may be. But you have to have a diverse student body to get these certain benefits, okay? So that justifies this kind of racial alchemy in terms of admissions. Here's the problem. Increasingly at schools, you have, regardless of how supposedly integrated they are, you're getting more and more racial separatism, separate classes, separate dormitories, separate graduations. There's more and more of that going on, and one of the basic reasons for that is because of mismatch, because of the serious mismatch in academic qualifications between Asians, Latinos, blacks, and whites.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
You want to know what's even crazier and funnier in a sick way? There's a security guard right there. The shoplifter, the looter, walks right by the security guard who isn't doing anything. He's got a jacket on with the big security on the back of his coat, and he stands there and watches the guy. The guy literally brushes right by the security guard. The security guard, what are they paying the security guard for? Just to stand there? Why don't we just put mannequins up in stores in New York? I may never go back. I swear, I may never go back. New York is turning into a hellhole, and Democrats are watching it. They're letting it happen. I can't wait to get Joe Borelli's take on all of this insanity.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
You called your son, and you personally promised him you would be here.
Lucas, I don't know how to help you!
Your daddy loves you, you gotta know it, pal!
Do you feel the love?
Prayer is a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work, if you believe.
What reason does he have to care about some guy who's supposed to be his dad, but is never around? I can't do it, I can't. I'm not ready for this, man.
I'm done with you.
We all deserve a second chance. Right, Ethan?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Sometimes there are policies so destructive that at first you don't believe they're true. Joe Biden is currently defending one, his plan to award $450,000 to migrants separated from their families after entering the U.S. illegally. Children of deceased U.S. soldiers are separated from their parents permanently. They don't receive this kind of money. And migrants who enter the U.S. legally certainly don't get this kind of payout. The really big jackpot, it seems, is being reserved for the lawbreakers. There are some obvious truths here. First, behavior that's subsidized gets repeated. Joe Biden is effectively inviting many more illegal immigrants to breach America's open borders. Second, he's betting over time the payoffs will benefit his party in political terms. Meanwhile, the vast majority of Americans watch in shock and dismay as our president, the country's chief law enforcement officer, brazenly rewards lawbreaking, a clear violation of his oath to defend our nation's laws. It's a sorry sight indeed.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
It seems like the Democrats tried their best to try to eliminate the filibuster, and it failed. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, thankfully, it did fail. Republicans stood united against that, as we have been from the very beginning, and Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin also stood with us in preserving the rules and the customs of the Senate. These rules and customs go back more than 200 years, Charlie. They are directly downstream from why our founders created a Senate in the first place, to provide the sober second thought against radical sweeping change to our country. It's pretty amazing that 48 out of 50 Democrats were willing to blow up the filibuster. They were willing to break the rules to change the rules. And Charlie, that would have just been the first step towards redistributing political power in this country. The Democrats' next stop probably would have been to make Washington, D.C. a state, our federal city that is by far the most liberal jurisdiction in America. So the Democrats could get 2 more Democratic senators in perpetuity. The next stop would have been to pack our federal courts, to include the Supreme Court, to stop the courts from overturning any of these unconstitutional actions. This entire effort, Charlie, was not about just altering this or that public policy. It was about forever changing the structure of political power in our country. You sometimes heard the argument that, well, the Democrats shouldn't do this because the shoe was on the other foot. Their entire goal was to make sure, Charlie, that the shoe would never be on the other foot. So it was a critical day in the history of our country and the history of the Senate as an institution. And I'm glad we stopped these radicals. That's why we have to turn them out of power in November.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
This really is a Leninist strategy. Lenin's old saying that the capitalists will sell us the rope by which we will hang them is what China's doing. The Soviets couldn't do it for a couple reasons. Number one, they didn't have the money. They didn't have a whole lot of rubles to throw around, and people in the West didn't want them. But number two, there was a lot bigger sense of social cohesion during the Cold War. The notion, if you're a corporate executive during the Cold War, that you would be playing footsies with the Kremlin was outrageous. And yet in the case of China, the human, I think that, part of that is there's been this naivete for decades that if we just gave China money, if we gave them access to our technology, they were going to buy our blue jeans, they were going to watch some of our movies, they would become just like us. What's really happened when you look at issues like censorship by big tech in the United States, when you look at some of the other things that are going on, it's not that China's become more like us. We've actually become more like China. And that experiment has to fade away. And the problem is not only were our elites wrong in their prescription of that policy, but that policy made them rich. And they do not want to now give up those relationships with Beijing because it means the money's going to stop flowing.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt on the West Coast where the El Diablo Santa Ana winds are blowing. Gonna be the hottest Super Bowl on record. And no one's gonna have a mask on. And the mask police are everywhere gonna tear their hair out. And it's too bad because we're done. We're done. And Canada doesn't know it. They're done too. We're also done with Team Biden across the board. They've screwed up Afghanistan and cost thousands of lives. And millions of people plunged into darkness. They've screwed up Ukraine. They've tempted Putin to the brink. They've screwed up the Winter Olympics. They let us go. Americans are rejecting it by not watching it. They've done tremendous brand damage to every corporation that is there, everyone involved with these genocide games. And now comes news that inflation is probably 7.2% in January, according to the Wall Street Journal. Experts will find out later this hour. 7.2%. You know that Social Security went up 4% in the beginning of the year. So every senior who depends upon their Social Security just went 3% backwards. According to the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, average U.S. household is spending an additional $250 a month because inflation is rising at its fastest rate in nearly 40 years. The squeeze stems from higher prices across a range of products and services, including cars, gasoline, furniture, and groceries. $250 a month for the average American family. That's Joe Biden. That's the ticket that you bought when you elected Joe Biden. That's the ticket that you bought when you elected Democrats. That's the ticket that you paid for when you sent the Senate majority in Georgia into the control of Chuck Schumer. $250 a month. Was it worth it? You also bought masks on your kids when they don't do a damn thing for kids, and they ruin a lot of their educational opportunity. They slow down people who need to be picking up pace. They have done enormous destruction, but because public employee unions control school districts and school board presidents and school superintendents, they're still on kids everywhere despite the enormous damage that they've done. The government does not listen to you. The government passes policies that gives money to somebody. I don't know where it went. Dwayne, did you get any money? Did you get any money, Dwayne?
For what?
Did the government send you any money for the $250 a month in inflation that you're paying?
No.
Okay, just checking. Because someone... Adam, did you get any money?
Absolutely not.
How about you, Ben? Did you get any money? No. So we don't know where the money went. So everybody, all these billions has been spent. The traffic is still bad. And masks are still on. And
Crime's
schools,
up.
Yeah. Schools were supposed to be able to open and be safe and have ventilation, all that stuff. Where did all that money go? It's like, do you remember Joe Biden was in charge of the Obama stimulus?
Every dime he was going to account for, right?
Yeah, every dime, and that's all gone. And nobody. That was only $880 billion. It wasn't a trillion.
And that was a ton of money then.
Back then, that was real money. And now we've got $4 trillion in Biden dollars, and nobody knows where it is. But you're paying $250 more a month in basics. So I just have a question for you. 1-800-520-1234. Buyer's remorse? Buyer's remorse. You voted for the Democrat. Do you have buyer's remorse? And if you're a progressive and you're very happy with the way things are going, I will let you speak. You do not have mean tweets. You do not have mean tweets. You got Putin on the border of Ukraine. You've got Afghanistan into midnight. You've got China hosting the genocide games. You've got 7.2% unemployment at home and masks on kids. Do you have buyer's remorse? 1-800-520-1234. Do you now know what I was telling you? Do you now realize what I was warning you about? This doesn't require rhetorical excess. It doesn't require anything except if you're driving right now. I know you are. You normally listen to NPR, but you can't anymore because NPR won't cover anything. NPR won't cover the masks. They won't cover the trucks. They won't cover the collapse of Fauci-Walensky credibility. They won't cover the fact that the new science shows lab leak. They won't cover any of this stuff. They won't cover 7.2% inflation, $250 a month. Do you know that when I had I don't know what young people are doing out of college. My first job, 1978, was for David Eisenhower and then Richard Nixon. I made $12,000 a year. Oren raised me to $18,000 a year when we moved to New York. I had to leave because it was just $2. I don't know what you do when prices go up. I lived on hot dogs at McDonald's. I was 21. You could do that. Jackie in Oklahoma, you got any buyer's remorse yet? Jackie, did you vote Democrat?
I did not.
Well, you can't have buyer's remorse then.
I do not have Biden's remorse. I was actually, you had mentioned masks in schools, and I work in upper level academia at a university, and currently we are being mandated to wear masks. We work with animals as our patients, and they're citing that we are a patient-facing facility. So that's their leeway as far as their mask mandates, and we're kind of trying to push back on that.
Wait, because you're dealing with dogs, you're a patient-facing facility?
Correct. Yes.
Who came up with this genius move?
I'm pretty sure it was upper level administration, and when we ask, where are the laws citing that you can do this? Where are your policies that you have in place? We don't get answers. Today, we're actually supposed to go meet with the dean of the school, and we're kind of going to present information. I mean,
you are my new affiliate in Oklahoma City, so call me back and let me know, because that's a hoot. I mean, I'm sorry for you.
Yeah, I'm actually in Stillwater, Oklahoma. I'm not in Oklahoma City.
Okay, well, you can call me back anyway. I don't know. What are you listening to me on?
96.9 The Eagle.
96.9 The Eagle. God bless you. And call me back tomorrow and let me know what they've come up with. Because if that's true, Call me Hugh, too. I ain't your dad. Thank you much, Jackie. Sharon in Ohio, got buyer's remorse yet?
Good morning, Hugh. Do I have what yet?
Buyer's remorse. Are you sorry about the Democrats being in charge of everything?
Oh, let me tell you, back in April, Mike Gallagher said something about buyer's remorse for voting for Biden. And my husband and I said, we need to make a sign. So we went and had a sign made for our front yard saying, Biden, remorse yet?
Very good. But Mike Gallagher inspired that?
That was a Mike Gallagher inspiration.
That's the first time that's ever happened. You mean Congressman Mike Gallagher? That couldn't be radio host Mike Gallagher.
Radio host Mike Gallagher.
That actually has never happened before.
Well, it happened back in April. And
are you from Dayton? Is that why you're from Dayton? You did that for Mike because you're from Dayton?
No, Hudson, Ohio.
Come on. What's the connection to Gallagher? Did he pay you to do that?
Nope.
You know, Mike pays people to call my show and talk about him. It's a very sad thing.
You know what? I think it's a wonderful play on words, and I wish to see that sign crop up across the country.
Biden remorse.
Biden remorse yet?
Yep.
Like buyer's remorse?
Got it, Sharon. Well done. Good idea. I'm sure it came from me and not Mike Gallagher. Bill in Indiana. Have you got buyer's remorse yet, Bill?
I asked this very question of my liberal Democrat friend within the last 4 days, and we have a very unusual relationship in that we're able to disagree vehemently and still be friends.
Of course, that's not unusual. That's my life. But go ahead.
Well, I find it unusual out here, and his answer to me was, I never really liked Biden in the first place, but at least he's not Trump. And I think that's a pretty reflective answer of a lot of people.
But $250 a month, is it worth it to him to not like Trump for $250 a month?
And he'd say yes in a heartbeat. He'd say yes.
All right, then he's rich. Bill, thank you. Go talk to him about it. Johnny, also in Indiana. Johnny, any buyer's remorse in Indiana? Hello, Johnny.
Yes.
You're on the air, Johnny. You got to wake up. You Hoosiers are really slow.
Well, I was talking and I thought I was on the air.
Well, you weren't.
But here's my question. Why don't they look at the bank account before they take office, meaning the president and his cronies, his coup, because that's what they are, a coup. And
wait, are you saying they are a coup?
Because he stole $6 billion
Johnny.
And put it
Johnny,
on
okay, goodbye, Johnny. I'm not quite sure you weren't listening there. Something was wrong with that. I think he said there was a coup. There was no coup. Joe Biden won. And he won, and it's your fault if you voted for him. It's your fault if you voted for a Democrat. You cannot vote for one Democrat anywhere in this country in November or October if you vote early. Not one. Or we'll never get out of this thing. We are now out of this. Number one, we are done with COVID. There are vaccines and boosters. You can get as safe as possible, or you can choose to get the disease. Children are not at risk. We're done. Take the masks off, go back to school, get on the buses, play games, grow up. Number two, stop yelling at people. Number three, stop spending money. We do not have any more money. Inflation is rolling out of control. 1-800-520-1234. Any buyer's remorse where you are? Because, boy, does America have it about Joe Biden. I'll be right back.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
This is Hugh Hewitt for townhall.com. Buckle up for 2022. The year in politics is going to be rough. The midterm election year seems predestined to banish the Democratic.
This is Carol Platley.
Streaming on Salem Now.
¿Cuánto queda?
No queda nada. Que lo siento mucho.
And that's the only time you can come to Christ, when the Spirit of God calls you to the cross. Don't you hesitate.
Have you ever thought of going to seminary?
Madre, padre, ¿quién está listo para ser transformado por el poder de su palabra?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery.
He said, listen, I gotta give these niggas enough. Not too much, but enough that I'll have them voting Democrat for the next 200 years.
The race grievance industry would have you believe that blacks get up and think about nothing else except race.
If I tell you this is racist, yeah, I would get you emotional.
There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, 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 racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
When you had the president in Atlanta saying to the crowd there that, you know, he didn't march in the shoes of the students that are marching today, but that he marched in the civil rights movement, and he remembers the first time he got arrested, when he never marched in any civil rights movement and has never been arrested.
I mean, can we even believe this? That he routinely says things that everyone knows are made up. Nobody calls him on it. Look, this is why you do your program, I do my program. We need to do our best to get the truth out. And we have to be clear. The president, he's plumb loco. I don't know what is going on. I guess I would say this. Albert despises the Biden gang, and the Biden gang despises her. They have to keep that quiet. But it's really something that I think they're going to consume their own.
The Democratic Party knows that they're in trouble. When you say that their staff sees what's going on and we all see it, we got to remember one other thing. Vladimir Putin, Premier Xi, the leader of North Korea, the leader of Iran, these people all see it too. And there is a message being sent globally that America is a laughingstock right now, that the bowl of mashed potatoes that serves as the president in the White House right now is nothing more than a suit.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
Welcome back. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Get up, get going. There's a lot of day ahead of you, but many of you are going to be swept by buyer's remorse when you learn the inflation numbers this morning. Wall Street Journal reporting that the average American household is spending $250 more a month after 1 year of Joe Biden being in office. 1 year, $250. Is it worth it? $3,000 a year for Joe Biden to get rid of the mean tweets. Dave in Florida, buyer's remorse in the free state of Florida?
Greetings. Yeah, I'm a former Cleveland Browns fan. Or not former. I used to watch the Browns. I used to watch Jimmy Brown run in Municipal Stadium, just like you.
I salute you, but I never got to. I didn't go until 65 after he'd retired. I was the youngest of three boys, so I didn't get to go to the championship game in 64.
See, I was the oldest of the three.
Yeah, I know. It always works out that way, so I should hang up on you, actually.
Anyway, I had a colleague, put it this way, a colleague tell me that paying $3.15 for a gallon of gasoline is the indication of a strong economy.
Oh dear. You know, I'm going to do a special report tonight, and as my research, my deep dive research, I always stop and fill up the tank on my way to talk to Brett Baer on the panel. Last week it was $5.05. So 2 weeks ago I did it with Brett. So it was $5.05. Last week Shannon Bream was in for Brett. So I will do my research today. My guess is it's higher.
Well, here in Tallahassee, it's about $3.15.
Well, you got to put in the free state of California versus the not free state of California. Dave, thank you. Mike in Arizona, buyer's remorse in the desert state?
Hi, Hugh. I'm going to make 3 quick points. In Arizona, with what I call the educated elite, liberals, there's no buyer's remorse. My family is a family other than me. I'm in business for myself. They're a family of educators, and they're all liberals. They all have master's and doctorate degrees, and their talk is always, well, at least we don't have Trump. That Trump, they're still talking about Trump. They're blinded to this, totally blinded.
It's $3,000 a year.
I know. Let me tell you something. My clients, the business I'm in, I'm business to business. My clients are hardworking, on-the-ground contractors, developers, small business people. They're conservatives. They know. They have remorse, except that they voted for Trump, but they are sick. But I'm telling you, these people in these protected, educated jobs, these teachers, they're
protected.
Totally
Peggy Noonan came up with that term, the protected class, and they are insulated from this. And you're right.
Let me make one more quick point. The other thing about the Olympics, I really think people are not watching the Olympics. They just don't watch that sport. People are just separated from that sport and the Olympics anymore. I don't think it's because of China.
Oh, I disagree, because 4 years ago, Mike, the ratings were up almost 100% above what they are now. Yeah. They're down 50%. So that doesn't happen in 4 years.
You could be right, but then the last thing is...
Mike, you could be right. Should be, you are right, Hugh. You're right.
Okay, I have mea culpa, but I will say this. At the NFL level, that's where you're seeing the ideological separation. People are fleeing the NFL because of the ideology of the league.
It's actually because of the Browns, but they're back next year. Mike, thank you, buddy. You had to listen, by the way, Mick McGuire, candidate for United States Senate in Arizona, coming up after the break. Robert, Seal Beach, California, up early. The El Diablo is blowing, Michael. Be careful out there. Robert.
Hey, good morning, Hugh. I just wanted to mention that I wish inflation was only 6 or 7%. When you go to the grocery store, what was once $1.09 for a box of graham crackers is now $1.59. Eggs used to be $1.59. Now they're
the Biden inflation.
It's horrible.
Everybody ought to talk about it. In fact, the Biden inflation is affecting, thank you for the call, Robert, your ability to buy a home. You've got to hurry to andrewandtodd.com. Call them at 888-888-1172. Great sponsor of the show. If you're going to buy a house, every day that you wait, it gets more expensive. Every single day that you wait. Because the 10-year interest rate is up at 1.929 this morning. Am I right about that? Yeah, 1.929. It'll be at 1.3.1 tomorrow. It's just going up. Every day your interest rate is going up. That's not the interest rate you receive. It's the interest rate on which your interest rate is based. You've got to get to Andrew and Todd now, andrewandtodd.com, or call them at 888-888-1172. Get out of your renting. Get into a house. Don't pay rent. It's going to go up too. Try and get into a house. andrewandtodd.com will pre-qualify you, give you a letter. Get out there and shop. I'll be right back with Mick McGuire, retired Air Force General, candidate for Senate in Arizona. Stay tuned to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
Could you let that happen for 10 weeks of your children being kept in a box in the library, excluded, put on display, and so on and so forth for that long? I kind of feel like, and I can tell you're a very caring mom, which is why you're bringing this public, but I kind of feel like that would happen for 2 hours, and I would be down there at that school and pulling my kid out, much less 2 to 10 weeks. Did they really endure that for that long?
They really did that for that long, and I really appreciate that question, and I've gotten that question a lot. And how we looked at it as a family is we could pull them and just go about our lives, and they'll just do this to someone else, or we could stay and fight and hold our ground. And my kids didn't want to leave that school. They've been in that school, my son, since first grade to 8th grade. They had their friends there. We still had hope that the trusted adults would do the right thing, and we eventually have pulled them to homeschool. But during those weeks, we were fighting. We have hundreds of emails to the administration, the Dallas ISD School Board. We went down, and I brought 30 or 40 grandmas and grandpas and other parents from other schools down to fight and speak on our behalf. Parents even scheduled protests, 3 protests outside the school. So we were fighting, but I think at this point in our country, the war has come into the family, and our kids can no longer be shielded from it. They need to be guided through it, which we did as a family, to build a backbone and learn how to stand up and fight, because this is their next generation. So instead of shielding them from it, we help them move through it with grace, integrity, and dignity, and they came out stronger.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
You called your son. You personally promised him you would be here.
Prayer is a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work, if you believe.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
This is Hugh Hewitt for townhall.com. Buckle up for 2022. The year in politics is going to be rough. The midterm election year seems predestined to banish the Democratic majorities in both houses of Congress. The country senses infirmity in President Biden, and many worry that our adversaries in China, Russia, and Iran sense that opening too. The shadow campaign for the GOP nomination in 2024 opens now, with the clear frontrunner being former President Donald Trump. The ranks of the top tier among possible GOP presidential nominees in alphabetical order starts with 2 senators, Arkansas's Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz of Texas. Then we have the populist Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, the former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. If the world grows even darker in the days to come, Cotton and Pompeo, 2 former soldiers, start with some advantages. It's possible one or more will run whether or not the former president does. My bet, with 3 years to go, is that Trump runs, and runs hard. Buckle up. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
I mean, listen, he's certainly not an elf, but he's an angry guy. You know, I hate to put everything in a political perspective here, but isn't it true? And I assume Peter Dinklage is no conservative. He's woke. He wants to cancel Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Why do they always want to cancel everything? You know, they want to cancel everything. What do conservatives believe in? We are for things. Biden's always saying, "What are Republicans for? Not for anything." Yes, we're for everything. We're for people. We're for people's right to make decisions about their health. We're for movies. We're for different views on the airwaves. We're not for people being canceled or movies being canceled or things being canceled. We're for things. And your side, Biden, is against everything. You're against Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Oh, I mean, Disney obviously taking it seriously because they're redoing the whole movie, I guess. Seriously, what do you portray them as children? Should child actors play the Seven Dwarfs? You going to get little Billy or Susie, who's about 9? The Seven Dwarfs in Snow White aren't children. Grumpy isn't a kid. In fact, that would be a great, if they're casting people, maybe Peter Dinklage can play Grumpy. Because he'd fit right in.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. On Saturday last, I was in Arizona to moderate two debates among the GOP candidates for governor and among the 4 of the 5 GOP candidates for Senate. I'm now beginning my individual interviews with each of those 9 people, beginning with retired Air Force General Mick McGuire. Elect Mick, I believe, is his website. Good morning, General. Good to have you on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Morning, Hugh. Thanks for having me. Great to see you after Saturday.
It was a great event. It was fast, and I got some questions about it. But first, let's give the audience who doesn't know you, because everything is going to depend on the Arizona Senate race, I think, to get to 51. Tell us about why Mick McGuire should be running against Mark Kelly.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Hugh. I retired April of last year after 38 years in the service, Air Force officer by trade, F-16 pilot. Flew in the first Gulf War, spent 14 years in the active duty. Separated after 14 years and transitioned to the Air National Guard here in Arizona. In 2013, was promoted to be commanding general of the Army and Air National Guard headquartered here in Phoenix. I'm 4th generation Arizonan, long history, beautiful wife, Debbie, known her since the 9th grade, married 33 years, 3 daughters, 1 grandson, and 1 granddaughter. And, people ask, why am I doing this? I'm doing this, Hugh, because I've never felt the threat of the Republic pulled tighter. Neither you or I were alive in 1861. The country needs great leaders right now that understand what's happening with the radical left, the seize for control that they're trying to grab. And we're seeing it with schools, with thought, with resources, and ultimately with gunpowder, all of these things that the left is always after.
So, General McGuire, what did you think distinguished you from the other candidates on the stage? Attorney General Brnovich wasn't there, but we did have 4 of the 5 candidates for Senate. What struck you in that debate?
Well, I think clearly you asked me a question about the triad. You let off with me, and we can debate whether or not we should be looking more at expanding SSBMs and submarines and or revamping our missile defense system and looking at next generation missiles. But the other 3, it seemed if I hadn't led with that answer, wouldn't have known what we were talking about. I think the other thing that really distinguishes me is, as I mentioned to you afterwards, Hamilton and Jefferson agreed about only 2 things: greatest threat to the fledgling republic, a large standing army, and oppressive taxation. I would argue, Hugh, we have arrived, that in the narrowly enumerated powers in the Constitution for the federal government, they have a requirement to arm the military. But standing it and raising it is something that's left to the states unless needed. And right now the Army's consuming 72 cents on the dollar on personnel costs. And while I love our great soldiers, that's just unsustainable.
General, I do believe that there has to be a fundamental reassessment of the division of the military budget between the 3 services, the Sea Service, the Land Service, and the Air Service. And I don't know that that's going to happen in my lifetime, but it's got to happen if we want to remain competitive. General, first question I asked the 4 of you, is Mike Pence right or Donald Trump right about the ability of Mike Pence to open the ballots or discard the ballots on January 6th? What was your answer?
My response was, you asked about the Electoral College, and I said, look, the Electoral College has voted. There is no constitutional remedy for the Electoral College. I've taken some heat in Arizona for a speech I gave literally 12 hours before I ended my nearly 38 years in service, when I said the country cannot have 4 more years of people saying, not my president. I watched it for 4 years under President Trump. It pulls mightily at those of us that wear the cloth of the nation. And I said, look, the Electoral College has voted. We are suffering the tragic results of the Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and Mark Kelly administration. But we elect the president by and through the Electoral College. The strongest argument I've made to my colleagues is we have to have voter ID laws. We have to have some mandatory hand counts here in Arizona. We have to consider getting rid of the platinum ballot, which is a law here in Arizona that allows just statewide federal candidates to be printed on a ballot same day. All of these things I think are challenging, but the truth of the matter is there is no constitutional remedy to the Electoral College. And I, as a constitutional conservative Republican, will never open that debate with the radical left, as you know, Hugh, because they want national popular vote. I'll never walk away from the Electoral College.
Well, you're smart. You're very smart to have that response. But I want to drill down. Vice President Pence said he did not have the authority to reject state elector lists. Former President Trump said he did. With whom do you agree?
I agree with Vice President Pence for this reason. As a states' rights guy, the electors are signed by, of, and through the states. Once they are delivered to the states, the vice president cannot usurp the rights of a Republic of Independent States and simply delivers those to the Electoral College for those 535. The individual that receives 270 or greater votes is the president. And I remember, Hugh, I'm not an attorney. I'm an F-16 pilot by trade. As I told you in the debate, I trained make the trees big and small and put warheads on foreheads. That's what I did and flew in the first Gulf War. But I can tell you this, those 270 electoral votes are assigned by, of, and through the states, not by the Vice President of the United States. We have to be very careful about what we ask for.
So, General McGuire, quick question. What's better, an F-18 or an F-16?
An F-16 is clearly the smoothest flying, most capable. 4,000 hours in that thing, Hugh. It is a great piece of gear.
I just had that.
Hey, Hugh, remember this: single seat, single engine. It's the only way to go. They call it the Widowmaker for a reason.
Well, I've got a F-18 pilot in the family, so I always have to ask just to make sure. He said you guys get to land on ground. He has to hit a carrier in the middle of the ocean. So I'm just telling you. You've heard that. Now, tell me something. I've never actually talked to an adjutant general before. What is the authority of the governor vis-a-vis the Arizona National Guard vis-a-vis the border? What can the governor do?
Well, the governor is the commander-in-chief of the National Guard at rest. And so you go back to the summer of 2020, Hugh. At one point, I was the commanding general of the Guard for nearly 8 years. But in 2020, at one point, we had the largest mobilization of the Guard since 1942. We had over 85% of all of our citizen soldiers and airmen on duty for 4 primary missions. We had 1,030 assigned to the border. We had over 3,000 in response to COVID. We had 1,495 on the streets of 5 different counties and 12 cities in response to civil unrest in the summer of 2020, and over 280 of them for wildland fires. You may have remembered we were here having a major wildland fire, and then they were out at Lake Shasta, and we helped out with those guys that were recovered out there in California. So,
how many National Guardsmen does Arizona have?
8,300.
Well, you were using them all. Now, you were the adjutant general for 8 years?
Almost 8 years. I was appointed by Governor Brewer, and Governor Ducey reappointed me. Was like I said, I was down in Tucson flying F-16s as the wing commander. We had some issues up here with misconduct. I relocated from down in Tucson. My family's been 4 generations in Arizona. After I left the active Air Force, came back home here to Arizona and figured I'd just retire there. But came up, had the opportunity to serve here, and saw things I never thought I'd see. You know, the one thing, Hugh, that I mentioned to you is, you know, the oldest position in our government, 1634, Massachusetts Bay Colony Territorial Governor. Second oldest position in our government, Adjutant General. Every state has one, 1636. Predates the Constitution and all of the things that we talk about as constitutionalists by a long, long way. Well, this is how Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution was written. It says we will raise an army and maintain a navy. We use different verbs for a reason. It's something that we have to get after. And we talk about peace through strength. Peace through strength means having the ability to conscript the patriotic and political capital of this nation when needed. But the founders knew that standing an army would be an excessive tax burden, and we would raise it only when needed. You know, we get into a whole nother show about how we got in this situation, but my argument is when the Air Force divorced the Army in 1947, we never post-mobilized from World War II.
Well, talk to me about how you expect to win. I saw 4 good candidates on Saturday. I know Brnovich, General Brnovich, a friend of mine. He's a good candidate, too. Got 5 good candidates. How does Mick McGuire win?
Well, I think right now I've done 30,000 miles. 30,000 miles in 7 months. This state is basically 400 by 400. I've been out and about talking to voters. I've been just saturating the rural counties. And the idea here is to make sure I hold my own in the urban areas, and the rural counties are going to pick the winner. They feel forgotten. This state, as I mentioned, is cattle growers, copper miners, and cotton farmers. And been out and about talking to them. And as I go forward, I continue to just raise an army. That's what I keep saying. This is about a grassroots campaign. Money is a factor, but it's not the only factor, Hugh. And the best example is the Real Clear Politics polling has me number 2 behind Brnovich. I mentioned in the debate, this is about character and courage. I was very disappointed in him. He was served with me in the Guard, was disappointed that he had not taken the time to face 800 constituents and you and Kathy at the debate. But going out there, going back to that polling, I'm number 2. Last 3 quarters in that polling, I've only spent $59,000 on Facebook ads. I'm kind of like a truck driver in New Jersey in that race out there in the last cycle.
General, I got to ask you about the debate itself. General Brnovich sent me his regards. He couldn't be there. He had a conflict. But I'm curious if you think any of those are better than Mike Kelly. Are any of the 5 Republicans better than Mark Kelly?
All 5 of us are better than Mark Kelly. Right now, Mark Kelly is the target. We have to realize, though, Hugh, it's not going to be an easy out. You know, this is how small Arizona is. My brother's wife went to elementary school with Gabby Giffords. So this is...
Well, you know, Arizona is a tiny place. Honest to goodness, it is a tiny place. Whenever I go over there, I'm amazed. I've been on the air for 20 years in Arizona, in Tucson and Phoenix, and I know everyone. Now I'm on in Prescott. And I'm just amazed at 800 people on a Saturday morning at 8:30 a.m. showing up for a Senate debate. Doesn't that strike you as a demand signal?
Oh, I can tell you this. The energy is real, Hugh. I realized how critical this race was when I've never run for any office. As I said, I wore the cloth of the nation for 38 years. I showed up at an event in July of 2021, 5 weeks after I announced, out in Sun City West. Over 300 people there, and the temperature outside was 110 degrees in the middle of the summer in a primary retirement community. And I looked at the legislative district chair, and he said, the energy is real. I mean, there are people that are terrified. They're afraid about what's happening. They don't know what's next. They feel abandoned. And I keep giving them a message of hope. An army without...
Well, you know, General, keep that up, because when the inflation number comes out today, it's going to be another hit to the average American. And the energy is going to stay high.
You bet.
7.5? Oh, General, you get a quick exit. Inflation, 7.5% in January.
Oh, terrible. And that's the independent voter. I go to get my hair cut. The beautiful woman that's been cutting my hair looked at me and said, General, you're running for Senate. Am I going to be able to afford gas and commodities in a year? And I said, the way that Biden has shut off our oil independence and ability to export, I'm not certain. They are running hard against the people. This inflation thing, the effect on jobs, there is going to be a red wave. The message of hope I give them is an army without hope is not a defeated army. As I mentioned the other day, Hugh, here in Arizona, we're going to raise an army of voters that say, I pick Mick. I pick Mick.
I hope you will keep coming back, General. We'll go through all 5 and we'll do it again. Talk to you next time on the next round. Elect Mick is his website. Thank you, General. I've got to tell you that ReliefFactor.com has not gone up 7.5%. It's still $19.95 for a 3-week starter pack. Inflation at 7.5% in January. Holy smokes. Biden, do you have buyer's remorse yet? 1-800-520-1234. You won't have buyer's remorse with ReliefFactor.com. It works. I carry in curcumin and resveratrol and omega. I take it in the first hour. I remind you in hours 2 and 3. Take it before you go out the door. We have different audience each day. I like to have everybody know they should be taking their Relief Factor before they leave. If you haven't started it yet, go and get it. Go to ReliefFactor.com. Tell them Hugh sent you. $19.95 3-week starter pack. No 7.5% hike there. $19.95. So you'll try it. Come right back. 1-800-520-1234. What do you think of that number?
Powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized to go after perceived domestic enemies. And that's very scary.
Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power.
We are now all rooting for his success. The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy.
We don't live in the United States of America as any of us would like to understand it.
We have a peaceful transition of power process. That's not what happened.
They interviewed General Flynn, and they did it in what was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russian interference.
They colluded. They were in on it.
He would constantly say, I have seen evidence of collusion.
Until this is released, I can't comment.
I can't go into the particulars.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific as.
But he knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
Well, it's classified. You can't see it.
Collusion. You just got to be willing to see it.
New York's Daily News ran this front page, Trump is Hitler.
How could 62 million Americans vote for Hitler? Are 62 million Americans Nazis?
We really almost thought it was a joke. Like, really, you're not going to accept that you lost this election?
Then they see the Russia collusion narrative sitting right there in front of them and say, why don't we just say that he cheated?
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want because they literally feel like they're fighting Russian spies and Nazis.
Russiagate has been the most egregious abuse of everything that was supposed to have been good about our government.
The thing that they were investigating the Trump campaign for is what they themselves were doing.
How 1 million children were placed with local foster families. Parents from all walks of life share their stories of overcoming the one-child policy by taking in orphans.
Go to salemnow.com.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Oy vey, these numbers. The U.S. inflation accelerated to a 7.5% annual rate in January, rising to a new four-decade high, the Labor Department said on Thursday, especially crushed renters. A steady pickup in rental costs, which account for nearly one-third of CPI, is adding inflationary pressure and will keep doing so. The rental vacancy rate dropped to 5.6% in the fourth quarter, its lowest level since the 1980s. There's no place to live. We haven't built houses. Bidenomics. We spent $4 trillion last year, and we didn't make any more money. We didn't make any more goods, and we were shut down. And do you have buyer's remorse? 1-800-520-1234. Lee in Maryland. Hey, Lee.
Yes, sir. How are you this morning? Yes, I do have Biden remorse, and I'll tell you why. Yesterday, I went to fill up a Subaru. 4-cylinder engine. The only amount of gas I could get was $25 because of the price increases in this country. It is absolutely ridiculous.
And, you know, he did shut down the Keystone Pipeline.
Oh, absolutely.
He did stop drilling on federal land. We went from an energy surplus, which kept Putin in check, to an energy deficit, and it's all Joe Biden.
Yes, it is. And it's funny, though, he can give Russia permission to do it, but not our company.
It's not funny. It's just Bidenomics. I'm telling you, thank you, Lee. 1-800-520-1234. I don't think anyone saw this coming. I just don't believe anybody saw this coming. Now, the good news, the very good news, is that Democrats have woken up to their peril, and they are changing their policies. This is Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida yesterday on why all of a sudden mask mandates are falling like trees in my backyard when I've got my whatever it's called out. Let's play Ron DeSantis cut
These
one.
kids are so much happier being able to go to school without having to wear masks for 8 hours a day. So when you start to see them kind of reevaluate or say all this, just understand this. The science didn't change. Well, the medical science didn't change. the political science changed. They feel the heat. They know that voters have been tired of perpetual lockdown policies. They know that they have basically offered no off-ramp, and they know that they're fixing to get whooped at the polls. And so that's what's causing the epiphany. But the fact of the matter is, if they had looked at the actual science from the beginning, they would have known that this was something that Florida was right on.
This is all predictable. The damage done to children was easy to see and easy to avoid after 6 months. When the pandemic first arrived, I do not mind caution. We did not know what we were dealing with. Before long, it became obvious that there was no upside, significant upside in masking children. It was all made up. Then we learned that cloth masks weren't doing a doggone thing. So that was all avoidable. When we spent $4 trillion last year, $4 trillion that we did not need to spend, we added to the money supply $4 trillion. And now you are paying $250 a month. More. Average household. Some are paying more, some are paying less. Average. So middle class America is getting crushed by Bidenomics, the Biden inflation. It was all foreseeable. Everything that has happened is foreseeable. And I told you about it, but enough of you were upset by Donald Trump and his mean tweets that you tossed him out. Now, I don't know that he's running again, but I do know Republicans are running in the fall. And the media is attempting to get us to focus on January 6th committee. I'm just not interested, and you're not interested in that. I'm interested in $250 a month. I'm interested in the price of gas. I'm interested in getting masks off of children. I am interested in the fact that Putin's going to roll into Ukraine. I'm interested in the genocide games. Nobody listens. Nobody in Washington, D.C. or Manhattan Beltway media, they do not listen. They do not report. They do not tell you. The brand, why does anybody want to be associated with genocide? I don't know. Why does anyone want to deny parents the right to choose for their children to wear a mask or not wear a mask? I don't know. None of it makes any sense. It's all driven by progressive elites talking to each other inside of a giant blue bubble. Twitter is a giant blue bubble. There are a few of us on there doing missionary work, but it's a giant blue bubble. And network television is a giant blue bubble. And Los Angeles entertainment and Silicon Valley, too. We got 4 giant blue bubbles. Silicon Valley, LA, New York, Washington, D.C. And they talk to each other and nobody else. Go to anywhere else in the country. Anywhere else in the country, and common sense prevails. Get outside of the Beltway, outside of Manhattan, get outside of LA, get outside of Silicon Valley, and everybody knows what's going on. Everybody. And the blowback that is coming at the polls in November, Democrats should just switch parties right now. If you're a common sense Democrat, you should say, I'm out of here. I'm not doing this. I'm not going to get blown out. And I know Democrats are retiring from Congress, 29 or 30. I'm not sure whether it's 29 or 30. Look, I'll be on special report tonight. I like going on when the inflation numbers come out because I know what Brett's going to ask me about. I got my new Dennis Prager book, The Rational Passover Haggadah, and it opens the wrong way. I got to call Dennis up and say, Dennis, they printed your book. This is the Alperson edition, and I've got my Rational Passover Haggadah. So Dennis Prager, it opens the wrong way. What am I supposed to do with this thing? I'm a goy. I don't know what to do. I need Dennis Prager to come on my show and explain it. But I think it's going to be the Lenten devotional for everyone. Thank you, America. I'll be back tomorrow. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Generalissimo. I'm Hugh Hewitt on The Hugh Hewitt Show.